Chapter 527. On the boat, Gong Yimo suddenly burst into laughter. She didn't know why, but when she saw that Gong Dai had clearly escaped unscathed, but still turned around to provoke Gong Che, that kind of childishness was filled with a strong sense of unwillingness. It was as if she was dissatisfied that she was pulled away before she could take revenge. Thinking about it carefully, he was only 17. When Gong Yimo laughed, Gong Dai was a little embarrassed. He didn't want to do that. He was really careless. He could have secretly taken revenge. For example, adding fuel to the fire in Beijing so that Gong Che would have to spend more effort to clean up the mess. He shouldn't have shown his bitterness in front of royal sister. What Gong Yimo didn't know was that when she was with Gong Dai, every time Gong Dai cared about her, he wouldn't easily kill people on the surface or use forceful methods. However, he quickly learned what it meant to save the country through indirect means. If he couldn't do it on the surface, he would do it secretly. However, Gong Yimo didn't feel disgusted by this kind of vile behavior. She didn't even feel that he was ruthless. Instead, she felt that he was a little cute. Was she poisoned by a poison called Gong Dai? The more she thought about it, the more helpless she felt. After feeling helpless, a sweet feeling filled her chest. This boat swayed, just like her heart, swaying. Gong Dai walked to her side and sat down. This boat was really too small. When he moved, the boat moved with him. He was so scared that he quickly lightened his movements. Royal sister, are you all right with the poison? Gong Yimo felt for a moment. I feel that I'm slowly regaining some strength. I should be fine in a while. After all, Gong Che wouldn't really hurt her. She still firmly believed that. At this time, the autumn sun was hanging high in the sky. Gong Yimo touched her stomach and took out some snacks and fruits from her space. She said a little embarrassedly, I only brought some daily snacks. You'll have to make do with them. They hadn't had lunch yet. Gong Dai's hand was stuffed with a piece of sweet milk cake that he hated the most, but was royal sister's favorite. She was always like this. Whenever she had something good, she would always want to share it with him. The first thing she would give was to him. Gong Dai sighed. In fact, he was so happy that he felt as if he had eaten honey. He took a bite and ate it without hesitation. Gong Yimo flipped through the desserts and found that out of all the pastries, there was only one piece of milk cake left. Furthermore, she had given it to Gong Dai immediately. She glanced at Gong Dai and then at the cake in his hand. She leaned over and asked in a serious manner. What is this taste? I don't think I've eaten it before. Why does this snack look so much like milk cake? Gong Dai almost laughed himself to death when he heard that. He raised his eyebrows and glanced at Gong Yimo. The flirtatious look in his eyes made Gong Yimo feel as if she had been bewitched, and her heart thumped wildly. If you want to know what it tastes like, why don't you try it yourself? Gong Yimo heard that and hurriedly moved her head closer. However, Gong Dai used the snack to lure her closer, and in the end, he stuffed the snack into his mouth. This was too naughty. Gong Yimo saw that the food had disappeared without a trace. She blinked her eyes, and in the next second, she directly pushed him down, snatching food from the tiger's mouth. The moment the milk cake entered their mouths, it turned into thick and sweet milk. It lingered between their lips, and the boat swayed non-stop. In that instant, when their eyes met, it was a heart-palpitating passion. Is it good? Gong Dai's eyes were dark as he hugged the girl. His exquisite eyes were originally sharp and beautiful, but at this moment, his beauty was enchanting and gentle. He was like an ice sculpture of a snow lotus that had withdrawn all its edges and corners, completely revealing the brilliance within. His pleasant voice was now hoarse and charming. It tickled her ears, and that tickling went all the way to her heart. I didn't taste it. Gong Yimo stared at him, as if she was bewitched by the beauty in front of her. Just now, she had only tasted him. How could she know what the snack tasted like? No, I want to taste it again. As she said that, without waiting for Gong Dai's consent, she pounced on him. She kissed his red lips. The enchanting beautiful man who had been abstinent for a long time, and the greedy and perverted woman who had been abstinent for a long time. At that moment, it was definitely a raging fire. Fortunately, they were in the wilderness. The boat swayed and swayed, so they didn't see why it was swaying. They also didn't know that there were two people lying on top of each other, happily kissing each other. Gong Yimo was a little moved. She touched Gong Dai's face. That most primitive throbbing made the two of them tremble even with a kiss. Their bodies were stuck together, as if they couldn't be separated again. Actually, I think, my injuries have already healed. Gong Yimo's low voice was no less than the most intense. It made Gong Dai's eyes as dark as the abyss. Babe, are you seducing me? It was too shameful to say that she was seducing him. Gong Yimo looked at his eyes from a close distance. The black and white of his eyes were distinct. At first glance, it looked cold. But now that she looked closer, those long eyelashes were fluttering, as if they were shy and trying to hide something. It made people want to look deeper and find out what was going on. It's obviously you who is seducing me, Gong Yimo said as she blinked her eyes. That soft voice made Gong Dai's whole body tense up. I still prefer to hear you call me husband. Gong Yimo smiled when she heard that. That fair little face of hers had a faint blush. The first feeling she gave when she showed her face was not only breathtaking, but also comfortable. It made people feel comfortable. Gong Dai was stunned. Just when they were in the thick of it, he heard Gong Yimo call him so softly. Husband. She clearly saw Gong Dai's Adam's apple moving non-stop, as if he was enduring something. When that fair skin was excited, it actually had a faint pink color, just like hers. It was simply too delicious. So she lowered her head and nibbled on his Adam's apple. Gong Dai suddenly let out an unbearable sound, making the two of them tremble. But he quickly shut his mouth in annoyance. He was actually stimulated by this coquettish little vixen. He had to teach her a good lesson. Husband, husband, husband. She blinked her eyes like a vixen, seducing his soul. That soft voice seemed to have a hook. It kept drilling into his brain, making him lose his mind. Gong Dai felt that he couldn't take it anymore, so he directly stuffed a piece of the snack Gong Yimo took out into her mouth. Gong Yimo saw that he seemed to be a little flustered. After swallowing a few mouthfuls, she began to tease him again. Husband. That voice repeated 1,000 times. Why won't you look at me? It turned out that Gong Dai had averted his gaze, glancing left and right, refusing to look at her. Even from so far away, she could hear Gong Dai's heart thumping. This extremely handsome man was unbelievably pure in some aspects. I'm afraid that I won't be able to hold it in. Then don't hold it in, Gong Yimo smiled maliciously. She wanted to see why Gong Dai's self-control was so good. Gong Dai glanced at her with watery eyes, as if he was wronged. He helplessly stroked her long hair. Because I want to give you the most perfect wedding. I want to save the best for that night, my baby. Chapter 528. When Gong Che returned to the palace, there was already a large group of people waiting for him. The hundreds of officials did not know what had happened and were waiting on both sides in fear. Before they could open their mouths, they saw Gong Dai quickly pass by. His expression was cold as he ruthlessly tore off the cloth that was tied around the wound and threw it on the ground. Without even looking at them, he went to Jiaoyang Hall. The cloth that was wrapped around the wound was covered in blood, causing the officials on both sides of Jiaoyang Hall to look at each other in dismay. They were even more alarmed. Could it be that Prince Qi wanted to fight for the throne? Otherwise, who would dare to hurt the crown prince? When the imperial guards around Jiaoyang Hall saw that the crown prince had returned, they separated into two sides. Someone quickly opened the door and let Gong Che in. At this time, Gong Cheng was already neatly dressed. He was wearing a dragon robe as he sat by the desk. The majesty that had been cultivated for decades made people know that he was the emperor and a dignified and wise ruler. However, at this moment, the wise ruler was in his twilight years. His emaciated cheeks and sunken eyes exuded a sense of powerlessness. He had originally been resting with his eyes closed, but when he heard the sound, he opened them and glanced at Gong Che. He didn't get angry and only spoke softly. You're back. The wound on Gong Che's arm was still bleeding. Imperial father, why? Gong Che could not understand and his face was filled with anger. Why are you so biased? Every time, you stand on Gong Dai's side. Is it because he is a prince? Is it because he said that he will never be the emperor? Gong Cheng pondered for a moment. After a few hours of relaxation, he was much better. When he saw the scene of Gong Che pressing down Mo he was almost angered to death. But at this moment, when he saw Gong Che return alone, he was suddenly not angry. Because no matter what excessive things Gong Che had done, Mo must have taught him a lesson. Am I biased? Emperor Gong Cheng chuckled softly. We thought we had already done everything we could for you. We gave you the best education, the highest status, purged the imperial court for you, and did not suspect you. You will easily become the emperor, isn't that good? Gong Che asked with a sneer. Why didn't you pursue the matter of Gong Dai's possession? You were so angry that you fell ill. Why didn't you pursue the matter when he came back? If he also had a bomb in his hands, why would Gong Dai be so arrogant? Gong Cheng sneered. I originally wanted to pursue the matter. Gong Dai has no sense of patriotism, and the country is too unstable in his hand. But, when I saw Moa, I didn't say anything. Do you know why? Why? Gong Che expressed his dissatisfaction with his eyes. Gong Cheng couldn't help but laugh. His son was sometimes very calm, but sometimes too impetuous. Haven't you noticed? Gong Cheng smiled mysteriously. Moa's arm has the chastity mark. His words left Gong Che in a daze for a long time. Chastity mark. That means Moa and Gong Dai didn't. At this moment, he couldn't tell if he was more glad or annoyed. Glad that she hasn't reached that stage with Gong Dai yet, annoyed that his actions today must have made her disgusted. Emperor Gong sighed. As soon as Moa came back, I realized that we had misjudged Gong Ju. I thought that he was a person who would never give up once he set his sights on a woman. But when it comes to Mo he tolerates it again and again. Yu Qi was such a good opportunity, but he was able to endure it. Since he can even endure this, what else can he not endure? In his hands, it might be safer than in your hands. Gong Che was originally full of doubts, but when he heard Gong Cheng's words, he was unwilling. If the bomb is in my hands, it's also safe. Gong Cheng sneered. Your actions during this period of time are like a different person, completely disregarding the consequences. I don't care what kind of stimulation you received outside, but before you do anything, you have to consider your identity as the crown prince. But have you considered it? He shook his head in disappointment. Gong Dai has the bomb in his hands, but he didn't hurt you. With his personality, he even let you come back in one piece. If you had the bomb in your hands today, would you let Gong Dai go? Would you? Gong Che was stunned by the emperor's series of questions. If it was him, would he let Gong Dai go? Gong Cheng concluded, I didn't pursue this matter because Gong Dai is a sharp sword, but now he has a scabbard. Moa is his scabbard, but Moa is a demon to you. Do you understand what it means to be the crown prince, and what it means to be responsible? This is your innate destiny. No matter how unwilling you are, no matter how much you hate it, this is your destiny, a destiny you can't resist. Gong Che's face turned pale, because Imperial Father said the same thing as Moa. At this time, he suddenly asked softly, Is Moa really not your child? Gong Cheng's eyebrows twitch. So this is the reason why you suddenly went crazy? Who told you, Empress? He immediately thought of the only possibility. Gong Che coldly said, This son accidentally heard it. His cold eyes stared at Gong Cheng. So, Moa really isn't your biological daughter. Gong Cheng was silent for a moment, then suddenly swept everything on the desk to the ground. Don't be delusional. As long as I acknowledge her, she will be your sister. It has nothing to do with blood relations, this is also fate. Gong Che pursed his lips under his exhausted roar. If this is fate, then why can Gong Dai do it? Gong Che suddenly looked at his hand, because I'm the crown prince, so I can't do anything. Because Gong Dai is a prince, he can do whatever he wants. It turns out that being the crown prince is actually so tiring, so tiring. If this is fate, can I give up this fate? Gong Che asked seriously. Gong Cheng couldn't answer, he just kept gasping for breath. Because of anger. Then wait until I'm dead. On the other side, Gong Dai hugged her and asked, Royal sister, you want to find the Snow Ganoderma, in other words, you want to find the Snow Clan's treasure. With that, he fished out a small piece of map from his chest. I got this map by chance. Gong Yimo's eyes lit up. She quickly took the map from his hand and said excitedly, "I also have a piece. Imperial Father gave it to me. Imperial Father said that only by dripping blood on it, it will show the map. I don't know how it works, but I want to try it." With that, under Gong Dai's somewhat puzzled gaze, she pricked her finger and painfully dripped a drop of blood on it. A strange thing happened. The parchment absorbed the blood and showed a corner of the vein. Gong Yimo exclaimed that it was magical. It can really show the terrain when it touches blood. What a strange parchment. At this time, Gong Dai looked at the person in his embrace. He also bit his finger and dripped a drop of blood on the parchment, but the blood didn't melt. In a flash of light, Gong Yimo's smile froze on her face. In her ears, she heard Gong Dai's faint sigh. "Not everyone's blood can do it, my royal sister." Chapter 529. Gong Dai's voice came from behind her. Gong Yimo was sitting on the boat in his arms. When she heard this voice, she reflexively wanted to leave, but his arms tightened, causing Gong Yimo's back to be pressed against his chest. She couldn't move at all. "Royal sister, do you know why other people's blood won't work?" His voice was low, and there was a hint of danger. "Is it because I have the blood of the Snow Clan in me?" Gong Yimo forced herself to be calm and even nodded. Gong Dai was so angry that he gently bit her ear. "This map was given to me by your grandmother. She said that only pure Snow Clan blood can fuse with it. At that time, she also told me something that made me lose my mind and I almost fell into her trap." Gong Yimo's back straightened. What could make Gong Dai lose his mind? The answer couldn't be more obvious. So it was the Snow Clan that told Gong Dai about her past. Gong Dai's fingers tightened around her waist, like a beast that was about to pounce on its prey. "Darling, don't you want to explain? Tell me, why can your blood fuse with it?" Gong Yimo swallowed and looked at the burning map in her hand. She felt the pressure of the man behind her and her heart began to beat faster. She thought that she had escaped a disaster, but she didn't think that what would come would still come. When they were in Yu Chi, he must have let her go because she was injured. Such a bad life. Gong Yimo thought, is it too late to pretend to be surprised now? She blinked her eyes and forcefully turned around in his arms. She put on a shocked expression. "What? This map can only be fused with the blood of the Snow Clan? I thought half of the Snow Clan's blood would also work. Could it be that there's something else to my past? Terrifying. I didn't know at all." Gong Ju was so angry that he pinched the tender flesh of her face with both hands. "Darling, you're too naughty. You still want to pretend? En." It was a dangerously high pitch that made one's scalp go numb. However, Gong Yimo was thick-skinned. She rubbed her face recklessly and looked at him blankly. "Pretend? I don't know. Are you saying that my father is the dead king of the Snow Clan? It's too terrifying." She covered her little mouth with both hands, looking as if she couldn't be any more shocked. "Gong Yi Mo." Gong Dai directly pushed her down. His hand pressed her against the small boat, causing it to sway again. "It's going to flip over," Gong Yimo said fearfully. "Woo-woo. Gong Dai's gaze is so scary. Will I be able to escape this calamity if I offer myself now?" He stared at her sternly. This matter was a thorn in his heart. He couldn't understand why Royal Sister never told him this secret. Why? Was it because he wasn't good enough? But he was clearly very obedient. He was clearly doing things according to how she liked them. Seeing a flash of hurt in Gong Dai's serious eyes, Gong Yimo also felt that it was not good to continue pretending. She touched his hair and stammered. "Do you think I didn't tell you and watched you suffer because I don't like you?" Gong Dai grabbed her hand with one hand. "Did I do something wrong?" It had been 6 years. From the first time he kissed her until now, she had never told him about this matter. Did she not know how much pain he was in because of this? Gong Dai stared deeply at her. He thought about how he had endured so many times because of their blood relationship. He also thought about how after confessing his feelings, he had to restrain himself again and again because of their blood relationship. He couldn't help but feel angry. If Royal Sister really liked him, why would she watch him suffer like this? He had even planned to not have children for the rest of his life just to be with her. "You're not bad." Gong Yimo frowned slightly, not knowing where to start. Then why did you? Gong Dai's breathing was a little unstable. His gaze deepened as he stared at her. Finally, he asked softly, when did royal sister find out? Tell me. Gong Yimo lowered her head sadly. Gong Dai let go of her hand and lifted her chin to kiss her deeply. Rather than a kiss, it was more like a ravaging. He had never been so ungentle. Gong Yimo was dizzy from the kiss and almost couldn't breathe. When he let go, she gave up the idea of lying and said softly, it's. Mother told me before she died. In other words, she knew from the beginning. She knew everything. This answer hurt Gong Dai even more. Sometimes, he really couldn't understand this little woman under him. Did she really like him? Gong Yimo saw his face turn pale and her heart tightened. But since you were young, I've raised you as my biological brother. To me, it doesn't matter whether you're related by blood or not. What's important is, how can I change you from my biological brother to my lover in my heart? Her hurried explanation made Gong Dai's heart soften. However, he still felt wronged. If he knew earlier, they wouldn't have taken so many detours. Gong Yimo seemed to have seen through his thoughts and said softly, I'm glad that you didn't know earlier. Why? Gong Dai didn't understand. She reached out and wrapped her arms around Gong Dai's neck. Suddenly, she smiled. Do you know what moved me the most? Gong Dai signaled with his eyes. Gong Yimo bit his thin lips lightly. It's because you endured it because of me. No one knew Gong Dai's character better than Gong Yimo. In her previous life, he was her ally and also her enemy. She helped Gong Che to compete with him secretly. On the surface, they were partners. Therefore, she knew this person very well. Later on, he became so cruel. A large part of the reason was because of what he went through in the cold palace. However, another part of the reason was because of his nature. He was like a greedy wolf. He liked to plunder and possess. He felt that only when he had a firm grasp of everything would it belong to him. In this life, although his character was much better, his nature was still there. However, for her, he endured it time and time again. He wanted to possess her, but he let her leave again and again. He wanted to kill and take revenge, but he didn't care about the consequences. However, for her, he chose to keep a low profile and be cold. For you, he was willing to suppress his nature and control his desires. For you, he kept his claws in front of the world and carefully wanted to give you the best. How could such a man not be moved? Of course, even if he had kept his claws, there were still many people who were afraid of him. Gong Yimo giggled. You really did it. You became everything I like. I don't like killing and I don't like being domineering. You helped me and gave me enough space. It's you who forced me step by step and gave in step by step. It made me feel that missing you would be the biggest regret in my life. Chapter 530. She pressed her lips against his once again and told him vaguely with narrowed eyes. Because of your tolerance time and time again, I was constantly moved by you. Finally, I was able to break through the barrier in my heart and choose to be with you. This process was very long. Thank you for only knowing about this now. You gave me enough time to completely fall in love with you. I love you, Gong Dai. Gong Ju only felt his world explode with countless fireworks in an instant. So, I love you was such a beautiful word. He could no longer think of feeling wronged, afraid or complaining. His mind was completely bewitched by Gong Yimo. He felt that he only knew now that he had given her enough time. It was a very lucky thing. Momo, the two words flowed between his lips with endless sweetness. His dark jade eyes seemed to be filled with mist and his skin gradually turned red. Clearly, the stimulation of the three words I love you was no less than the best. He was moved and could no longer hold it in. He did not want her after the wedding. He wanted her now. Gong Dai's actions were a little intense and Gong Yimo was provoked by him. She giggled and resisted. She liked to tease him. She liked to see a cold person like him go crazy for her. Don't move. Gong Dai pressed her hand to the right side. Kisses rained down like a storm. Gong Yimo was kissed by him until she shrank her neck. So itchy. Her avoidance and refusal made Gong Dai's eyes burn even more. His dark eyes seemed to be a little red, but they emitted a kind of bewitching beauty. "Don't move." Momo, Gong Dai's actions became more urgent. He tugged at her clothes and kissed her intensely. Gong Yimo was so ticklish that she laughed. Her resistance became more intense. She even sat up and leaned against the wall of the boat to catch her breath. "No, it's too ticklish." Her eyes were filled with tears, and her white face was flushed red. Her hair was disheveled, as if she had been ravaged. Her soft voice was like a hook, hooking Gong Ju's reason and making him lose his mind in an instant. Gong Dai narrowed his eyes and suddenly pounced on her fiercely. He fiercely blocked her lips. However, she was sitting and leaning against the side of the boat. When Gong Dai pounced on her, the world instantly turned upside down. Gong Yimo's lips were still blocked by him, but she still subconsciously let out a muffled cry of surprise. The boat had capsized. The cool lake water made the two of them quiver. However, Gong Dai did not let Gong Yimo off the hook. Both of them could hold their breaths, so it was fine for them to stay in the water for the time being. However, it had to be said that it was Gong Yimo's first time kissing in the water. Gong Dai's and Gong Yimo's hair spread out in the water, floating and entangling like seaweed. The underwater sun was not dazzling at all. The light that shone down even turned the underwater world into a grotesque and variegated appearance. Gong Yimo quickly felt her back touch the bottom. The water was not deep, only a few meters. The small fish disappeared without a trace in an instant. The water was clear, and under the illumination of the light, it presented an indescribable magnificence. As for them, they were like outsiders who had accidentally intruded into another time. There was no sound around them. Even though they were in the slightly cold water, she could still feel how hot Gong Dai's body was. After the kiss, Gong Dai looked deeply into her eyes. In the water, they could not speak, but Gong Yimo could accurately receive the affection transmitted by those eyes. They were like seaweed entangling her, leaving her with no way to escape. Gong Yimo could not help but lean forward and give him a gentle kiss. In the water, the two beautiful human figures overlapped once again. The silver embroidery on the black robe was actually glowing in the water. It was entangled with Gong Yimo's light green muslin robe, as if they would never be separated again. Gong Dai hugged her tightly. There had never been a second like this, where he felt as if he had her. So he hugged her tightly, allowing their heartbeats to overlap as they kissed each other tightly. "I'm completely yours now." Gong Dai could clearly read the meaning in Gong Yimo's eyes. "I have always been yours." Gong Yimo was sure that Gong Dai had answered her like this. For a second, she felt that they were already married. The throbbing and sweetness that she had never felt before drowned them like water. It was just like a dream. Climbing out of the water, the two soaked rats looked at each other and could not help but smile. Gong Dai did not plan to hide it from her, so he directly told her. "When we find the snow Ganoderma and come back, we will ask Father to host our wedding. No matter who stopped it, no matter what the world said, and no matter what the future generations wrote, this grand wedding would not be lacking." Gong Dai gently tucked her wet hair behind her ear. "When the time comes, we will go into seclusion together." "No." Gong Yimo shook her head. When she heard him talk about marriage, her heart could not help but tremble with joy. So she held his hand and told him firmly, "We will not leave. We want to live in front of the world in a high-profile manner and let the world see how sweet we are." Gong Dai could not help but frown. "Didn't you always care about the world's opinion?" He knew very well that the royal sister hoped that the world would like her, or at least not dislike her. He did not know the reason for this desire. Gong Yimo thought of the scene of her being cursed by the world in her previous life, and in this life, the man in front of her. Suddenly, she smiled sweetly. "I was originally very afraid." She gently bit her lower lip, which was kissed by Gong Dai until it was red and swollen. "But with you, I am suddenly not afraid." She playfully winked and hugged him as she said firmly, "With you, it is enough." She did not want to care about the world's opinion anymore. When this thought came to her mind, she suddenly felt her whole body lighten. It turned out that everything in this world, whether it was right or wrong, would become shackles. Even beliefs and dreams. However, beliefs and dreams did not mean that they were wrong. Everyone lived with shackles on their backs, and they could even live very well. Gong Yimo chuckled softly. With shackles, there was motivation. But without shackles, it was a very relaxing thing. Had she fallen? Royal sister, Gong Dai could not help but hug her and whisper into her ear, "I really want to get married tonight." He frowned slightly, but he felt that the girl in his arms deserved the best. Gong Yimo was in his arms, looking at the river in front of her, at the green mountains in the distance, and at the smoke coming out of the sparse houses. She smiled gently. "As long as you are willing, every day will be a newlywed." She threw a coquettish glance at Gong Dai. "As long as you are alive and happy, you don't need to worry about these things, and you don't need to feel burdened." As she said that, she straightened up and secretly looked at Gong Dai's figure. Because he was wet, his clothes were tightly clinging to his body. She smiled lecherously. "How about starting from tonight?" "Newlywed? Royal sister." Gong Dai flew into a rage out of humiliation. What should he do if his beloved little vixen kept seducing him? Waiting online urgently. Chapter 531. To find the treasure of Snow City, she had to go to WN City. But Gong Yimo only had 2 pieces of the map. After piecing together, she found that she was still missing 1 piece. So she decided to go to Long City with Gong Dai to meet a few people, and Gong Dai's people were all in Long City. From the looks of it, it seemed like they had occupied Long City. Gong Yimo first saw that crazy woman. She was Qiu Zhongchan's wife. Logically speaking, she had nothing to do with her. In her previous life, she only saw this woman when Qiu Zhongchan died and went back to see him for the last time. She really didn't know why she wanted to deal with her. In the end, she reaped the consequences of her own actions. Gong Dai originally wanted to find someone to cure the GU poison in her body. But he found that there was no cure when the GU poison flared up. Sometimes she would be awake, but when it flared up, the attack power was very strong, and she didn't recognize anyone. When Gong Yimo saw her, she had just calmed down. She looked at Gong Yimo with deep hatred in her eyes. That hatred made Gong Yimo have an illusion. Did she kill someone's entire family? Gong Dai coldly stared at the woman in the dungeon. She shrank back and no longer dared to look at Gong Yimo with that kind of gaze. "Who sent you?" Although the probability of getting an answer was very small, Gong Yimo still asked. Sure enough, the other party didn't say a word. Gong Yimo frowned. "You used the GU poison to harm me, but didn't want me to find out. Is it because the mastermind doesn't want people to know about his existence?" Wu Qi still didn't answer. She was lying in the dungeon in a sorry state. Only the occasional flash of fierce light from her messy hair proved that her eyes were open. Strange, cold. In her previous life, she had this kind of feeling towards this Grandmaster's wife. She didn't seem like a human, more like an emotionless killing machine. Gong Yimo moved closer. After returning, her martial arts had recovered little by little. So she didn't worry that Wu Qi would hurt her. Gong Yimo said softly, "You wanted to use this poison to harm me but ended up harming yourself. But you don't have the antidote to save yourself. Can I assume that this poison has no antidote?" Gong Yimo. She suddenly opened her mouth. That hoarse voice, like a 70 or 80-year-old woman. Wu Qi slowly raised her upper body. In the dungeon, her slow movements were like an evil spirit. "You've betrayed your mission." Gong Yimo thought that this woman had gone crazy. Mission? She glanced at Gong Ju. "How come I didn't know I had a mission?" "Mission?" Wu Qi looked at her solemnly. "The mission to destroy the world." Gong Yimo straightened up and helplessly said to Gong Ju, "So he's a madman," but Wu Qi's wife's words, Wu Qi to Qiu's, Wu's to Qiu's Wu's, but Qiu Zhongchan's name didn't make the woman in the dungeon react. Qiu Zhongchan's life and death were unknown, but she didn't ask. She was really cold-blooded. Gong Dai pulled her into the dungeon, ignoring that crazy woman. He asked softly, "Who is that Qiu Zhongchan?" "Royal sister." "What's your relationship with Yunding Mountain?" Gong Yimo smiled, narrowed her eyes and said mysteriously, "Yunding Mountain is my sect. When I was 3, Qiu Xingfeng and his master, Qiu Zhongchan, came to Daiyu State to visit and took Long Hanyang away. But Qiu Xingfeng gave me a cultivation method by chance before he left. So in my heart, Qiu Xingfeng is my master. So the cultivation method in royal sister's hands was given to her by Qiu Xingfeng? But this didn't make sense. If it was only cultivation method, how could royal sister read and understand? Gong Yimo touched his head and smiled slyly. If there's a chance in the future, I'll tell you. But not now. She blinked her eyes and smiled mischievously. Then, she went into the depths of the dungeon. Her nominal grandmother was still waiting for her there. Gong Yimo's eyes flashed with a faint light. Although she didn't know where these enemies came from in this life, she wasn't afraid of the unknown and the challenge. Old Lady Xue Qi didn't have any reaction when she saw her. Instead, Xue Zhon looked at her coldly. Gong Yimo, Madam is your grandmother. How can you let Gong Dai treat her like this? He questioned her loudly. Gong Dai was indifferent, and Gong Yimo was the same. Grandmother? Gong Yimo held Gong Dai's hand. I didn't want to use me to kill the grandmother of my beloved. Shameless. Xue Zhon was so angry that his beard stood up. Gong Yimo didn't care. She even kissed Gong Dai's face when she heard what Xue Zhon said. If I had a sense of shame, you wouldn't have had the chance to kill my man. She touched her chin. Let me think. You did this because you wanted to use Gong Dai to threaten me? This method of secretly harming her in such a roundabout way was really the same as the person behind that crazy woman's back. Gong Yimo's mind suddenly flashed with inspiration. Bah! Xue Zhon said angrily, we just couldn't stand it. You are from the Xue clan. Instead of taking revenge for the Xue clan, you took the enemy as your father. The king of the Xue clan doesn't have a daughter like you. We controlled Gongju in order to force you to commit suicide. Gong Yimo narrowed her eyes and smiled slyly. Really? If Xue Wu she didn't tell me the truth, maybe I would have believed it. She said it like it was the truth. But now, I already know that your motive is not so simple. Let's not beat around the bush. You poisoned Gong Dai to control me, and then you used a roundabout way to poison me. What is the Xue clan trying to do? Xue Zhon wanted to say something but Xue Wu Shi's name silenced him. How did Gong Yimo know Wu Shi's surname? Wu Shi hid it so well. His moment of hesitation let Gong Yimo know that she had made the right bet. Instead old Lady Xue suddenly opened her eyes and said hoarsely, What Xue Wu Shi? My Xue clan doesn't have such a person. Xue Zhon then realized that he might have been tricked and didn't dare to say anything. Gong Yimo giggled and said, There isn't such a person because she is already married. As for why you are here, let me guess. Old Lady Xue was like an old monk in meditation, quietly staring at Gong Yimo. Gong Yimo leaned against Gong Dai, her snow-white fingers pulling at her chin, as if she was pulling at a non-existent beard. For you to personally take action, there are only two possibilities. 1. There is a disagreement within the Xue clan. Most people don't approve of your way of doing things, so you have no choice but to personally take action. 2. You didn't do your job well and made the person behind you angry. So in order to atone for your mistakes, you came up with this idea. Xue Zhon didn't know how to describe his feelings. Because Gong Yimo, she was so smart that it was scary. Chapter 532. You didn't do your job well. It can be reflected in that rock. You didn't make me trust you, made me not bring that rock with me. Gong Yimo touched the fake rock on her body, her gaze faint. It clearly looks the same. I am really curious, how can you be so sure that this rock is fake? The Real rock was still in the Dai Yu State Imperial Palace. After she returned from Yu Qi, she went to confirm it that night. It was still there. Old Lady Xue did not speak. Gong Yimo's clear voice was somewhat cold in the deepest part of the prison. I once read in some books, there is a type of meteorite from outer space. It contains radioactive substances. It can interfere with a person's thoughts. Gong Yimo did not understand, because this type of interference could not be controlled, it could only stimulate the nerves. What use was it? If it was useless, then why did they want her to bring that rock with her? You want to control me. Gong Yimo came to this conclusion, but in her heart she felt that this was nonsense. A piece of rock wanted to control her. This was the real world, not a fantasy world. The only explanation was that they wanted to control her, but they had other methods. This rock, was only a very important part of it. Old Lady Shui did not speak for a long time, and Shui Zhon was even more shocked. He felt that Gong Yimo was terrifying, because she was able to deduce the real result from the clues. Seeing that they did not speak, Gong Yimo laughed softly. Seems like you have nothing to say? Could it be that my guesses were all the truth? But she could not think, who could control the Shui clan, or borrow the Shui clan's hand to control her? What was the benefit of controlling her? She could not help but think of that crazy woman's words. She said her mission was to destroy the world. Gong Yimo laughed involuntarily. Since she could not think of anything, she might as well not think about it. She looked at old Lady Shui. Alright, let's not play guessing games. I want to go to the Shui clan's treasure. But other than the map you gave me, my mother left me a map. There is another map. Where is it? Old Lady Shui moved hearing this. Her face twitched, as if she wanted to reveal a smile. You want to go to the treasure? Could it be that, before Xuelian died, she didn't warn you again and again not to go? Gong Yimo pursed her lips. Father did say that mother had left me such a will. She didn't want me to go to the Shui family's treasure. She looked at old Lady Shui with a burning gaze. Even if I ask you, you won't tell me the reason, right? Old Lady Shui sat cross-legged in the prison, her pale white hair covering her face, making her look even more strange, her voice also broken and hoarse. If you want to find the Snow Clan's treasure, I'm happy to support you, but I don't know where the other map is. The old woman narrowed her eyes. She seemed to recall the scene of a map being torn apart by 3 people. There were many dead people there, and the reason for so many deaths was because after Snow Country fell, some people held a grudge, so they held such a sacrificial ceremony to summon the evil spirit and destroy the country. Destroy the world. Gong Dai clearly also thought of the words destroy the country and destroy the world he saw on the stone pedestal. Combined with the words of the crazy woman Shui Wuxi today, she said that destroying the world was Royal Sister's mission. Gong Yimo seemed to be stunned, obviously also thinking of this. She was the person summoned by the Snow Clan to destroy the world. What kind of joke was this? Gong Ju couldn't help but comfort her. Sister Gong, don't worry too much. The people of Snow Country believe in evil gods and practice witchcraft. Most of the people have been brainwashed by their superiors to believe in resurrection and the ability to summon evil spirits. However, these things don't exist. As for why they came to you, perhaps it's because you are the daughter of their dead king, the only daughter. That's why they said it was your mission. But Gong Yimo could not help but think more. At that time, under the stone pedestal, it was recorded that the remnants of the Snow Clan spent 4 years to hold a large-scale sacrificial ceremony. Not to mention whether it was effective or not, when she transmigrated in her previous life, she was 3 years old. Adding the time she was in her mother's womb, it was exactly the 4th year of Snow Country's destruction. Chapter 533. If it was a coincidence that she had transmigrated here at the same time as the sacrificial ceremony, then how could she explain what had happened afterward? She had indeed unintentionally taken out the Dharma artifact and caused a calamity. Didn't that directly correspond to the words carved on the stone pedestal, destroy the country and destroy the world? Also, why didn't these people appear to deal with her in her previous life? Was it because she had really caused chaos in the world by chance? Was that why the mastermind was so satisfied that they didn't appear? But didn't she later pacify the 4 countries? The more Gong Yimo thought about it, the more she felt like she was possessed. She felt a chill run down her spine. Was all of this really a coincidence? She felt that she couldn't think about it any further. Otherwise, she wouldn't feel good. But she still believed that there were no ghosts in this world. There must be another reason for all of this. Gong Dai saw that Gong Yimo's face had turned pale. He frowned slightly and spoke to her calmly. Royal sister, look at me. Gong Yimo obeyed and looked at him with a confused expression. She had seen this face countless times, but it always stunned her every time. Gong Dai held her hand. Royal sister, you've taught me since I was young that there are no ghosts in this world. People can have beliefs, but it's best to believe in yourself and not others. Gong Yimo nodded. She realized that Gong Dai really remembered every word she said. Gong Dai smiled. That smile calmed Gong Yimo's flustered heart down. You also said that there are countless mysteries in this world. They may seem unsolvable, but the answer must exist. So don't be afraid of the unknown. Uncovering the mystery is also an interesting experience. Gong Yimo's heart gradually calmed down as she listened to his words. With Gong Dai around, it was very reassuring. Then, she was a little dazed. Did she really say all of this? It was too philosophical. Gong Dai saw that she had calmed down and lowered his head to plant a kiss on the back of her hand. Don't be afraid. You still have me. This time, it really warmed her heart. Gong Yimo couldn't help but laugh. I'm not afraid. He was just a little confused. Don't worry, let's solve the mystery together. And that person who tried to deal with me, I must find him and see who he is. Gong Dai watched as she waved her little fists in a determined manner. Her pair of black jade eyes contained a faint smile. Then, shall we eat first? Gong Yimo leaned into his embrace. I don't care, I still want to feed you, she shamelessly whined. Gong Dai half-hugged her and felt extremely sweet. Okay, I'll feed you. Just like that, one ate while the other fed. The one who ate was happy and satisfied, but the one who fed was also full of happiness. Gong Dai sometimes thought that if he hadn't met the royal sister in this life, how boring and lonely would he have been? He definitely would not marry, because those people were not worthy of him, and he would not smile so much. He really could not think of anyone else in this world, other than her, who could make him feel the urge to smile, to have such a warm feeling, and to only hope that the years would be peaceful and quiet. There was one thing he didn't say. That was, if the royal sister was really the spirit of destruction, he was also willing to help her destroy the world. Destroy the world hand in hand and help the world hand in hand. As long as she wanted, as long as she was around. Gong Yimo and the group set off for Wan City. Since it was the Snow Clan's treasure, it must be in the former Snow Country. Then they had to come to Wan City. The streets were still the same as a few years ago. Gong Yimo even remembered how she met Qiu Xingfeng and Long Hanyang after she disguised herself. There were some things she didn't dare to think too deeply. For example, did Qiu Xingfeng return to Mount Yunding? For example, was Qiu Zhongchan still alive? If he was still alive, he would definitely come to save Xue Wuxi after he recovered. But she didn't know how much Qiu Zhongchan knew about Xue Wuxi. Mount Yunding shouldn't have been involved. Gong Dai held Gong Yimo's hand as they walked on the streets of Wan City. It was dusk, but once they appeared, they immediately attracted all the people's attention. The so-called Golden Boy and Jade Girl were just like this. Gong Yimo was a little dissatisfied with the girls who walked by and peeked at Gong Dai. Gong Ju had recently been living with Yimo, and he looked as if he had a wife and everything was fine. Therefore, the smile on his face had also increased. He was no longer as gloomy as he used to be in the capital. Although he was still cold and cheerless, people could feel his calmness and gentleness when he held Gong Yimo's hand. So when Gong Yimo passed by a mask stall, she didn't even think about it and took a mask that exposed the nose and mouth and put it on Gong Dai. Millimeter, it's so beautiful. Don't take it off. Half of Gong Dai's face was covered, but his temperament was still charming. His red lips were slightly pursed and he had a kind of beauty that could topple the world. But his beauty was all for one person. I'll do as you say. The woman who bought the mask had probably never seen such a beautiful couple and couldn't help but say, Madam is so beautiful, and has good taste. This mask is very suitable for your husband. Gong Yimo was happy when she heard that and took out money to buy it. But Gong Dai paid the money and took another mask and put it on Gong Yimo. Madam is so beautiful, I also want you to wear it. His voice was low and hoarse, like flowing water, which made Gong Yimo blush. The woman at the stall looked at them enviously. She took the money but was a little embarrassed. This stall is small, I can't change this money. Young master, do you have something smaller? Gong Ju glanced at the woman. Her beautiful ink-black eyes were set off by the white mask. It was as if there was a flash of light flowing through them. No need, your business is doing very well. Such a sweet mouth, there must be a reward. Then he pulled Gong Yimo and left. Gong Yimo quickly went to look at other stalls. Gong Dai looked at Gong Yimo dotingly and felt sweet in his heart. Did they really look like husband and wife? This knowledge was really delightful. At this time, a female voice attracted Gong Yimo's attention. Girl. Let's close the stall and go home with mother. The little girl replied crisply, Yes, mother. They may not know Gong Yimo, but Gong Yimo still knew them. It was shameful to say that when she went to look for the water cloud grass, she hired an old man who made a living by picking herbs. He was this woman's husband. Unfortunately, he died tragically in the hands of Long Hanyang. But she avenged them. Gong Yimo originally did not want to disturb their peaceful life. At that time, she had disguised herself and they could not recognize her. So she let this matter go, but who knew that at this time, the person at the stall next door suddenly shouted, Aunt Shue, don't forget to go to the market tomorrow. Gong Dai knew what she was thinking. He could not help but pull her and whispered, Royal sister, this used to be Snow Country's territory. There are many people with the surname Shue. But Gong Yimo stared at the back of the mother and daughter. She felt that there was an unknown sixth sense. Chapter 534. Let's go back. Gong Dai asked Gong Yimo, but Gong Yimo thought about it and said with gritted teeth. There are many people with the surname Shue, but I know that woman's husband. He is an ordinary but not ordinary person. Perhaps he can be a clue. After saying that, she pulled Gong Dai and followed them. It was unknown where they lived after moving out of the hopeless forest. When the sky turned dark, Gong Dai followed Gong Yimo to the mother and daughter's house. It was still only the two of them. It seemed that the woman did not remarry. Hearing the knock on the door, the woman asked her daughter to open the door. After 3 years, the little girl had grown into a big girl. When she opened the door, she saw a man and woman who were so beautiful that they did not look like real people. She could not help but be stunned. Who is it? After hearing no sound for a long time, the woman walked out. She seemed to have gained weight again. There were layers of meat on her stomach and her eyes were very big. She looked very fierce. That's right, a woman was in charge of the household and had a daughter. How could she not be fierce? You are. She was also dazzled by the appearance of the two. Oh my, she had never seen such good-looking people in her life. Could it be that the fox in the mountains had turned into a demon? Seeing Gong Yimo smiling, wasn't she exactly the same as the little fox? Gong Dai pulled Gong Yimo's hand and then raised a prince's token. The imperial court is working. I hope that Madame Shue can make things easy for us. The woman was stunned. She clearly did not expect the two of them to be officials. Although she was flustered, she still moved to the side to let the two of them in. She frowned and thought for a while before smiling apologetically. How could I be a madam? Official, please have a seat. If you have something to ask, this madam will tell you everything she knows. Gong Dai looked at Gong Yimo and Gong Yimo said with a smile. Is your husband's surname Shue? The woman pulled her daughter to the side and sat down. Hearing this, she rubbed her hands uneasily. Are you here for my late husband? But my late husband has already passed away for a few years. She wanted to cry as she spoke, but her daughter was curiously looking at Gong Dai. She had never seen such a good-looking person before. Gong Yimo did not notice this. What's your husband's name? She was the one who buried her, but she didn't know her name. The woman frowned and lowered her head. My husband's surname is Shue and his first name is Xiao. He's just an ordinary herbalist. Everyone in our village knows that. Gong Yimo smiled comfortingly. Don't be afraid. We are here to help you. To be honest, your husband has something very important in his hands. It might bring you a fatal disaster. We are from the imperial court, and we are here to settle this matter. Gong Yimo began to spout nonsense. It would have been fine if he hadn't thought about it before, but now that he thought about it, that old man was really different. He even knew about the water cloud grass and fire cloud grass, and he even knew about their medicinal properties. It should be known that 80% of the pharmacopoeias did not have any records of this type of accompanying plant. Only a few families with profound knowledge would know a little about it. So Gong Yimo felt that no matter whether it was true or not, she should trick her first. Sure enough, her words frightened the other party. Even that little girl stopped staring at Gong Dai, and instead pulled her mother to ask, "Mother, do we have such a thing in our house?" The woman glanced at her and patted her hand before speaking to Gong Yimo. "To be honest, the reason why I can have a house in town and even have a small business is because my late husband helped a nobleman." Speaking of this, her eyes flickered. "Although I received 100 taels, my late husband also lost his life because of it. Our house is already so poor that even thieves don't come. How could there be anything important that would be coveted by others?" Gong Yimo frowned. "This is a serious matter. Why don't you think about it again? For example, did your husband say anything strange or leave anything strange behind?" At this moment, the little girl interrupted. "Father's words are very strange, but they also make sense." "Wang Nan." The woman glared at the little girl with dissatisfaction, and then shook her head firmly. "I'm sure. There's nothing special in our house. My late husband didn't say anything. Where's the map?" Gong Yimo suddenly took out a piece of parchment. "Something like this. Is there really nothing?" When she took out the map, Gong Yimo stared at the little girl. She saw that the little girl was confused at first, then suddenly widened her eyes as if she had thought of something. At that moment, Gong Yimo was sure that she had guessed correctly. The woman was stunned at first, but when she saw Gong Yimo looking at her daughter, she quickly hugged her and said, "We don't have that kind of thing in our house. Please leave." Gong Yimo knew what was going on. She slowly pushed a banknote on the table. "Madam Shui, to be honest, this map is useless to you. It might even bring you trouble. After all, if I can find you, others can also find you. Just like this little girl's name." Gong Yimo looked at the little girl. "Shui Wang Nan? Plus, your husband guarded Hopeless Forest every day when he was alive. Don't you think I can understand that there's something interesting in the south of Hopeless Forest?" Gong Yimo's words made the woman tremble. "No. I don't understand what you're saying." At this moment, the sound of metal flowing slowly could be heard. Gong Dai pulled out his narrow sword, and the two women widened their eyes in shock. "Do you understand now?" Gong Yimo's eyes were wide open. "How could this be?" Gong Dai's murderous aura frightened the little girl. The woman had never seen such a scene, and she softly cried out and hugged her daughter tightly. Under Gong Dai's cold ink-black eyes, her scalp went numb. For a moment, she thought that Gong Dai was really going to kill her, so she couldn't lie anymore, and she said in a trembling voice, Since you're so smart, you should know that you can't go to that place." Originally, she followed her late husband's instructions and didn't tell anyone. However, this man didn't look easy to get along with. She was a widow and an orphan, so she had to tell him. "And this has nothing to do with Wang Nan. I've been married to my husband for decades, and he's always been an ordinary person. We don't know what kind of map it is. My late husband didn't say much, and we don't know why you're looking for us." She was just a woman, so how could she have experienced something like this? Seeing Gong Dai's ferocious look, she quickly spilled the beans. Thinking back to her poor and bitter life, she never thought that her husband was any different from other people. She didn't expect something like this to happen after his death. Gong Yimo smiled. "Your husband and I have a history. You can think of it as me coming to you today is fate." The woman hugged her daughter in silence. After a while, she spoke. "We really don't know anything. We can give you the map, but you have to guarantee our safety." Chapter 535. She was not a member of the Snow Clan, and she was a woman. Although she knew the importance of the map, she did not have any concept of it. Now that someone had come knocking on her door, she felt afraid. She only wanted her and her daughter to be safe. As for the consequences of giving out the map, she did not care. Gong Yimo smiled. "Deal." She couldn't help but think of the wise old man. If he was still alive, he definitely wouldn't have handed over the map so easily. However, he died in an accident. Sometimes, she really felt that many things seemed to be arranged by the underworld. It was just that she didn't really believe in this kind of arrangement. But she believed in her sixth sense. Perhaps there really was something interesting in that treasure trove. The woman hesitated for a moment, then took her daughter to the side and cut open a piece of black leather hanging on the wall. Why would it be placed in such a conspicuous place? But it was not conspicuous. The leather was covered with oily leather. If she did not cut it open, it was really difficult to find a different world. And that map fell into Gong Yimo's hands so easily. Gong Yimo held the leather paper, somewhat in disbelief. Your husband really did not say anything? The fat woman was at a loss, frowning and stammering. He only repeatedly warned that the map could not be given to others. He said that if it fell into the wrong hands, the world would be in chaos. In fact, the woman did not believe that there was treasure in Snow Country. Even if there was, there would not be much money in it. After all, Snow Country was not rich at all. So she always felt that her husband was making a fuss over nothing. So what if the treasure was taken away by others? It was because she thought so that when she gave it away, she did not feel that it was a pity. Gong Yimo looked at the cut leather and suddenly pursed her lips into a smile. The old man collected herbs for a living. This leather appeared a bit abrupt. Did your husband have any close friends in the mountains when he was alive? The woman hesitated when she heard this. Yes, there was one. She uneasily pinched her apron. That person was very powerful, but his personality was not very likable. He was also blind. My husband pitied him, so occasionally he would give him some food. We were not very close. Then where is he? The woman glanced at her daughter and suddenly felt a little strange. He is at the Southern Peak Bridge in the Hopeless Forest. In other words, Wang Nan was actually referring to a person. Gong Yimo was satisfied with the clues and went back with Gong Dai. Then, Gong Dai sent people to settle the mother and daughter down. When he returned to the room, he found that the royal sister had put the map together and dripped her blood on it. However, reading maps was not her strong point. She really did not know where these lines were. However, she was very smart. Now that their hearts were particularly close, Gong Dai felt that his patience had never been so good. He felt very happy when he hugged her. As long as she did not make a fuss, he could usually hold it in. However, he tried his best not to sleep with her. It was only for a short period of time, and he was afraid that he would accidentally fire. After all, this little vixen was very annoying, so he left a goodnight kiss between her brows. Gong Yimo suspected that he was the same person as in her previous life. So before he left, Gong Yimo pulled his sleeve. How about staying and sleeping together? Under the shadow, her bright black eyes blinked, and the quiet night suddenly had a playful taste. Gong Dai readily followed her advice and really laid down beside her. Gong Yimo rubbed against his chest in satisfaction, and suddenly felt a little emotional. Unknowingly, you've already grown so big. So big that he could completely encircle her body in his arms, so big that he could give her peace, stability, and a sense of security. Time flies so fast. Gong Dai stroked her hair. The young man's heart was satisfied at this moment. That gentle look was definitely unique in the world. Is it fast? He laughed softly. He still felt that it was too slow. In those days without her, he was constantly forcing himself to become stronger. Those days were very fulfilling, but also very difficult to endure. Fortunately, all his efforts were rewarded. Was there anything luckier than this? Gong Yimo nodded. Sleep. Chapter 536. In the Hopeless Forest, on the Southern Peak Bridge, there was a crumbling thatched hut. A blind man was eating. The food he was eating could be said to be coarse and unrecognizable. However, he seemed to have lost his sense of taste and only ate to fill his stomach. A young man dressed in luxurious clothes stood by the side. He felt that there was no place for him to stand in this house, not to mention sitting down. I can't believe that the great elder who is the best in martial arts has fallen to such a state. TSK. How pitiful. The man dressed in luxurious clothes was still fanning himself in the autumn, looking like a rich scholar. However, the blind man smelled the rancid stench in the air. He put down his broken bowl and said in a low voice, "Whose skin did you cut off this time? Get out of my house quickly. That stench makes me lose my appetite." The blind man's words made the man close his fan. He was angry. However, as the blind man said, this skin was not his own. Therefore, although he was angry, even if his eyes were fierce enough to devour a person, the corner of his mouth still had the same smile as before. That smile seemed to be carved on his face and did not change at all. It's okay. You can be fierce to me, but don't scare the delicate guest who will be coming later. She's really smart. She got the whole map in one go. Poor thing. I spent 10 years and couldn't find it. So you actually gave it to Xue Xiao. That person was born invisible. No wonder I couldn't think of him. As he spoke, he sighed regretfully. If only I knew earlier. I would have killed Xue Xiao and sent the map directly to her. I wouldn't have to wait so long. His words finally moved the blind man. He glared at the man. No one can go to the Holy Land. Over my dead body. When he said this, the aura of his body exploded. It made the man in luxurious clothes take a few steps back. However, he still had that smile on his face that seemed to be measured with a ruler. He said softly, "She's destined to destroy the world. You can't stop her." The blind man sneered and stretched his body exaggeratedly. "Only people like you who are blinded by greed will believe in sacrifices and evil gods. Get out of my house quickly. Looking at you makes me sick. Don't worry, as long as I'm alive. Don't even think about entering the Holy Land." The finely dressed man sneered and didn't force it. He couldn't find the map, but Gong Yimo could. He couldn't enter, but he could follow Gong Yimo. He believed that the girl would not disappoint him. After all, he had already waited for so many years, a few more days wouldn't make a difference. With that thought in mind, he left leisurely with a smile on his face, but his eyes were incomparably cold. After waiting for so many years, was it finally here? Not long after he left, Gong Yimo arrived. Seeing that the door was wide open, she stuck her head out and asked, "Is anyone here?" The clear and melodious voice was very pleasing to the ears. Just by hearing the voice, one could tell that it was a quick-witted girl. Blind's hand paused. This girl, was Xuelian's child? Gong Yimo saw that no one responded, so she walked inside curiously. However, Gong Dai pulled her behind him and walked in first. This room was really too dirty. Gong Dai frowned and then saw the mighty man sitting in the dark. As expected, it was a blind man. "Who is it? This place doesn't welcome strangers. Get out," Blind suddenly said, his voice full of impatience. But his face was facing Gong Yimo. He could smell Gong Yimo's scent, that kind of sweet, bewitching smell. Gong Yimo was startled by his unkempt appearance. She quickly hid behind Gong Ju, and the blind man also looked over. "Is he really blind?" she said. "I'm not a stranger. I'm Xuelian's only daughter." She saw that the other party was calm, and obviously knew her identity. She couldn't help but ask, "You're the elder of the Xuelian clan?" Gong Yimo immediately understood the key point. That's right, that herb-gatherer old man didn't know martial arts, but the elder of the Xuelian clan should know martial arts. Perhaps, this person was the elder, and that dead herb-gatherer old man was a witch doctor. It had to be said that Gong Yimo was right again. After all, if she could find this place, others could definitely do it too. If the thing was left with him, even if his martial arts were high, it wouldn't be safe. It was better to leave it with someone else, someone who no one could guess. But the only thing she didn't expect was that this elder's martial arts were higher than she thought. He sat there without moving, but the words he spoke were like a bell, and his aura was oppressive. "So what if you're Xuelian's daughter? Leave immediately. Otherwise, I'll let your blood splatter here." His voice wasn't very loud, but when it fell into Gong Yimo's ears, she felt dizzy. She secretly raised her guard. This man's martial arts might be above hers. "I can leave if you want." Gong Dai supported Gong Yimo, and coldly stared at the man. Gong Yimo signaled Gong Dai to be at ease, and said, "Now that I have the whole map, I can go find the Snow Country's treasure at any time. I'm here to ask you a few things. If you answer, I'll leave immediately." The blind man was silent for a moment, and after a while, he impatiently said, "Quickly ask. If you ask, scram." Gong Dai slightly raised his eyebrows. This man actually dared to speak to the royal sister like this. Gong Yimo was afraid that Gong Dai would be angry, and hurriedly asked directly, "It said that the Snow Country's treasure is in the Snow Country's sacred land. Then why don't the Snow Country's people know where the treasure is, and still rely on the treasure map to find the location? And who is the person who always secretly wants to control me? You must know all these." When the blind man heard this, he suddenly laughed strangely. He stood up, and casually sized up Gong Yimo. Knowing that he couldn't see, but Gong Yimo still didn't like being stared at like this, as if there was nowhere to hide. Snow Country's treasure, sacred land. The blind man sneered, "Only Xuelian can freely enter the sacred land, other people naturally don't know where it is." Gong Yimo didn't understand, and waited for him to continue. The blind man stood in the shadows, and Gong Yimo couldn't see his face clearly. She only knew that he was a tall but very sloppy person. In the past, the sacred land and the royal family didn't invade each other. The sacred land was isolated from the rest of the world. My master was the last holy elder of the sacred land, and it was also him who gathered the results of the predecessors, and the treasure that had existed for 100 years in the sacred land, and obtained a terrifying thing. When he said this, he didn't seem to care, and summarized it in a few words. When the treasure appeared, the news spread like wildfire. After the Snow Country's king knew, he became greedy. Even if he knew that this thing had terrifying side effects, but he still coveted it. First, he thought of a way to marry my master's daughter, which is Xuelian, and then, with Xuelian's hand, he stole a part of the results. Chapter 537. The blind man sneered, "Your poor mother thought that the man truly loved her and risked being beaten to death by master to steal some of the thing. But this is not the scariest thing. The scariest thing is that people are always greedy. The king wanted to get all the results and the Holy Land. However, in the depths of the Holy Land, there were layers upon layers of restrictions left behind by the ancestors. Only the Holy Elder and his bloodline could open the restrictions. Thus, he bewitched Xuelian and took advantage of the wedding to poison his master and everyone in the Holy Land. And I escaped because I stayed behind to guard the Holy Land. I originally wanted to kill that bastard. But Xuelian was pregnant and begged me. Coincidentally, the people of Dai Yu State attacked us. With both internal and external troubles, I had to help my people. Then, Xuelian was kidnapped by the Emperor of Dai Yu State to cure the poison." He paused. When he said this, he spoke quickly and without emotion, only impatience. After Xuelian came back, she said that Dai Yu State agreed to withdraw their troops, but the king was not willing. He felt that the Emperor of Dai Yu State was right in front of him and this was a rare opportunity. As long as he could get the thing in the Holy Land, Snow Country could use this opportunity to kill the king of Dai Yu State and even swallow up Dai Yu State. This temptation was too great. So he begged Xuelian to bring him into the Holy Land. Xuelian would rather die than obey, so the king threatened to kill her, and this matter was known to the Emperor of Dai Yu State. After Xuelian cured him of the poison, he fell in love with Xuelian. Now that he saw that someone wanted to hurt her, he naturally would not allow it. So the army attacked Snow City and Snow Country ceased to exist. In this way, it could be considered as preventing a catastrophe. Gong Yimo listened to him talk for so long and said angrily, "So you want to tell me that in this world, only I can enter the Holy Land, right?" She put her hands on her hips. "Get to the point. Don't you know that I'm in a hurry?" The blind man was angry when he heard this. "What do you know, you brat? Do you know what that thing is? You only want to go to the Holy Land. You won't even know how you died." Gong Yimo rolled her eyes. "I've heard the Snow Clan say that they can resurrect a person's soul. Ha 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 ha, do you think I'm a 3-year-old kid?" The blind man was provoked by her obvious impatience and said with a cold smile, "I won't go so far as to reincarnate, but I can still dominate the world. How about it? Are you tempted?" Gong Yimo scoffed. "I'm not brainwashed by the evil god. Do you think I'll believe you? I'll know what's inside once I take a look. After talking for so long, you still haven't told me who the mastermind is." Blind was irritated by her words and snorted. "Since you're so powerful, why don't you investigate it yourself?" Gong Yimo had never seen such a petty man before. Goodbye. I won't see you off. The blind man turned his head away in disdain, as if he didn't want to see him. Gong Yimo didn't even turn back as she pulled Gong Dai away. But once the two of them came out, they calmed down a lot, especially Gong Yimo. Her impatient look disappeared and she looked at Gong Dai with a headache. How much do you think we can believe in his words? Gong Dai definitely didn't believe a single word. If he wanted to know something, he could investigate it himself. But looking at Gong Yimo's expectant eyes, his eyes curved and he chuckled. 30%. Gong Yimo was satisfied and nodded. I think so too. 30% and no more. Then are we still going? Gong Dai meant that it was still early. Should they follow the map to find the treasure? Gong Yimo shook her head. That person just now was very loyal to his master. But his master was poisoned to death. My mother didn't live up to expectations and did something wrong because she was seduced by a man. The people in the Holy Lands are all dead. He hates me, no. I should say that he hates everyone who covets the Snow Clan's treasure, so he definitely doesn't want anyone to find the treasure. Gong Yimo looked at Gong Dai and blinked. If you don't want anyone to find the treasure, would you still keep the treasure map? Gong Ju naturally wouldn't. He also guessed that the one in the treasure map given to him by the blind man in Shuexiao's hands was fake. Maybe there will be clues. The fake entrance would definitely be filled with traps, but there would definitely be clues. This was the reason why he wanted to take a look. Gong Yimo thought for a while and her eyes turned. She leaned over and whispered in Gong Dai's ear. That's right. If I'm the only one who can enter the treasure, the mastermind might want to control me because of this. Why don't we beat him at his own game, and use the fake treasure to trick him? After saying that, she kissed Gong Dai's ear. The tip of his ear turned red. He glanced at Gong Yimo. She was cold but full of charm. Seeing Gong Yimo's smiling face, he couldn't help but sigh. Baby, can you stop seducing me and do something serious first? He was still waiting to get the snow Ganoderma for his wedding. Seducing you is also a serious matter, Gong Yimo said as if it was a serious matter. The trees rustled and the sunlight shone on her face through the gaps of the leaves. Her face was rosy and was extremely cute. Ever since she was sure that Gong Dai wouldn't act rashly before the wedding, Gong Yimo had been acting. Thinking of ways to seduce him had almost become a kind of fun between them. As for the treasure, sorry, Gong Yimo and Gong Dai didn't believe that a backward country that worshipped witchcraft would have any treasure. At most, those people had spread rumors about it and there was no need to believe it. Gong Dai had a headache. His royal sister was getting more and more naughty. Gong Dai, Gong Yimo opened a pair of bright big eyes and pulled him and acted coquettishly. I'm tired from walking. Can you carry me around and walk around? What she meant was for Gong Dai to carry her around to check out the terrain. Anyway, the map was already imprinted in Gong Dai's mind. They just had to look at it on the spot. How could Gong Dai resist? He directly carried her in his arms like a princess. His arms were very strong. Not only was he talented in martial arts, he was also 10,000 times more hardworking than Gong Yimo. Just based on physical strength, Gong Yimo was far from being his opponent. Therefore, carrying someone on the mountain path was a piece of cake. Gong Yimo ate snacks in his arms and watched Gong Dai walk to the top. Only by standing at the highest point could one have a panoramic view of the surrounding terrain. He took one step at a time, his step steady. Gong Yimo curled up in his arms, not to mention how safe she was. They walked for a long time just like that. Gong Dai, I suddenly thought of something. Her soft voice was as delicate as a kitten's. The sound that came from his throat rang softly in Gong Yimo's ears. She mumbled softly with her eyes half closed. I love you, but you've never said that you love me. She closed her eyes and frowned, as if she was very dissatisfied. Gong Dai couldn't help but smile and didn't say anything. He always wanted to save the best for the day of their wedding. At that time, she could listen to it as many times as she wanted. Finally, he reached the top in one step. The 4 directions were under his feet, but the little one in his arms fell asleep sulkily. Gong Dai stood in the air and said softly with a smile. My love for you is above the heavens and earth and will not be destroyed for 10,000 years. Gong Yimo rubbed against him, but she still didn't hear him. Chapter 538. When Gong Yimo woke up, it was already evening. They were sitting on the edge of the highest cliff. The wind was biting cold, and below their feet was a bottomless abyss. There was a large patch of sunset in the sky. The blue of the night sky was suppressing the purple and red rays of the sunset. It was like an intense collision. A few stars impatiently appeared and dotted the top of their heads. In this kind of evening, the peaks of the mountains below were covered in a layer of orange, contrasting with the green mountains. Occasionally, birds would fly by. The world was vast, and one's heart would tremble. Gong Yimo was stunned. After seeing it, she felt that it was a pity. If only there was a camera. It was such a pity that such a beautiful scenery was not recorded. Gong Dai hugged her and put his coat on her. He was waiting for her to wake up and see the world. In the past, he had always heard from the royal sister that the world was very big and there were many beautiful scenery. However, after going to so many places, he realized that it was not that the scenery was not beautiful, but that it lacked that person who could make you calm down and look at the world with peace of mind. Now that she was here, the beauty of the sunset in the mountains was shocking. Gong Yimo leaned in his arms and looked at it without blinking. It was as if the scenery was intoxicating and made her feel unreal. She even felt that she was not real. Such a perfect boyfriend, such a perfect relationship, did it really belong to her? She was afraid that when she woke up, she would wake up to a battlefield. She was even afraid that when she woke up, she would return to the modern world. Because here, there was a man that she could not bear to part with. She sat up and carefully looked at the man behind her. "You're real, right?" She asked a very stupid question, but asked it very seriously. Gong Dai looked at her quietly with his clear eyes. There was a smile in his eyes that was softer than the setting sun. "You're real, and I'm real. Whether it's real or fake, I'll follow you." When Gong Yimo heard this, she shyly blinked and revealed a proud smile. "Then, you're not allowed to leave me forever. What I say is always right. You have to listen to me. The wife at home is too strong. The family rules are only for you. Is that okay?" Gong Dai was amused by her series of requests. He reached out and touched her little face. Because of the strong wind on the cliff, her little face was a little cold, but the texture was like soft jade, making him unable to put it down. "You're right. I'll always listen to you. There's only the wife's authority in the family, not the husband's authority. The family rules are only for me, not you. In the end," he said firmly in his uniquely pleasant voice. "I will never leave you." Gong Yimo's heart started to race. This must be love. This must be love. Falling in love would cause a woman's IQ to drop. It would cause a woman to ask a few questions over and over again. She would hope that the other party would patiently and resolutely tell her everything she wanted to hear. Gong Yimo couldn't help but lean forward. She closed her eyes and gently kissed him on the lips. This kiss was as light as a feather, but in the dazzling sunlight, at the edge of the lonely and spacious cliff, the light shone through the gap between the two of them kissing. When the two of them hugged each other again, only a complete shadow was left behind them, inseparable and without any gap. They whispered sweet nothings at the edge of the cliff for a long time. Naturally, they had to get down to business. Gong Dai compared the surrounding mountains and found the location marked on the map. It was close to the hopeless forest, hidden in a primitive forest. If they didn't have the map, it would be really difficult to find the entrance. They went back first. The next day, Gong Dai brought people to surround the area. If the fake entrance was here, the real one must be nearby. Gong Yimo was thinking about the person who had been spying on her. She was thinking about how to trick him into going in. That person must be nearby. She didn't know how he hid himself, but she didn't notice him at all. There were only two possibilities. First, that person's martial arts was higher than hers. But this possibility was too small. Second, that person was like Qiu Zhongchan. He had learned some assassin skills and had some achievements. That was why he could hide from them. The group of people searched in the mountains for a long time and finally found the fake entrant. It was hidden in the mountain stream. There were snakes, insects, rats, and ants everywhere. Gong Dai was afraid that the grass on her feet would itch. Because Gong Yimo's skin was too soft, he kept her in his arms and let the others guard far away. He brought Gong Yimo in. No one had set foot on this land for many years. Every step Gong Dai took, he would sink deep into the fallen leaves on the ground. So he walked very slowly. Finally, they walked in front of a mountain wall. Under the cover of the trees, there was a very inconspicuous circular stone door in front of them. If they didn't know the direction, it would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. Gong Yimo's idea was very simple. That was to open the stone door and go in. At the same time, she wanted to see if there was really someone following them. She didn't have any fear of this place. After all, she didn't think that the ancient people's mechanism would be so delicate that it could do anything to her. Her goal was just to catch the hidden person. There was a small groove on the stone door. Gong Yimo reached out and twisted it. With a buzzing sound, the door opened by itself. The design was very delicate. After the door opened, the space inside wasn't big. This was good. It was convenient for her to catch the person. So she and Gong Dai walked in with a torch in their hands. They didn't close the door. In front of them was a long passageway. As Gong Yimo walked, she guessed, according to the previous technology, the mechanism in this place shouldn't be very clever. At most, the poison would be more powerful. After you and I recuperate, there shouldn't be a big problem. But if this is a fake entrance, then the real entrance shouldn't be far from here. It's even possible that the real entrance and the fake entrance are connected. Gong Dai pulled her hand. No matter what, we can't be careless. Gong Yimo nodded. Her hand moved carelessly and sprinkled some powder behind them. Gong Yimo had many good things in her hands. Gong Dai knew that, so he didn't care. The torch in his hand lit up this small area. They didn't feel afraid. Snow Country pursues witchcraft and believes in evil gods. What do you think they've researched in the sacred lands for so long? Feeling bored, Gong Yimo asked Gong Dai curiously. Insects. Gong Dai was already prepared to see a bunch of insects in the treasure. After all, in this mountain, weren't insects the most abundant? Gong Yimo shivered when she heard this. Terrifying. She had actually forgotten a very important matter. That was that she hated those fleshy insects very much. Very much. At this time, a fragrance suddenly came near. Gong Yimo instantly turned around. The prey had taken the bait. Chapter 539. That powder was actually nothing special. It was just the perfume that Gong Dai had given her. This perfume would only release its fragrance when it was heated up. When she sprinkled it behind her, it would be fine if no one passed by. But when someone passed by and the powder stuck to the soles of their shoes, the friction caused the perfume to release its fragrance. However, he might have thought that the smell was coming from Gong Yimo. After all, Gong Yimo had walked this path before. At this moment, when Gong Yimo smelled the fragrance, she immediately turned around. The other party still did not know what had happened. But he had been discovered by Gong Yimo. But it was too late for him to run away because Gong Dai had already sealed off his escape route. What made Gong Yimo disappointed was that that person looked like a young man from his figure. Gong Yimo guessed that the person who had schemed against her should be around the same age as her mother. This person was so young, so it was clearly not her. He was not Gong Dai's opponent. In the end, he was fiercely pressed against the wall by Gong Dai with one hand. Gong Yimo was happy to see this. Seeing that that person's hands were being suppressed by Gong Dai's other hand, she was not afraid that the other party would play any tricks. She skipped over to follow him. She curiously looked at that black-clothed person. His disguise was very good. Even after such an intense fight, his breathing was not messed up at all. It was obvious that he was an assassin who lived in the dark. "Who are you?" she curiously asked. The other party blinked. He felt that he could not break free from Gong Dai's grasp and was afraid that Gong Dai would kill him, so he quickly spoke. I'm your older brother, His words stunned Gong Yimo. Older brother? Gong Dai was a little dissatisfied. This man wanted to get close to the royal sister. Thinking of this, he used more force. The other party cried out in pain, let go, let go. I'm really your older brother. We have the same father but different mothers. Gong Yimo finally understood, you're my dead father's child? How terrifying. He actually has other women. The man in black was a little discouraged. My mother wasn't favored. I was born in the stables. Later on, when the country was invaded, I escaped. It's normal that you don't know of my existence. Then why are you following me? Who sent you? Gong Yimo would not be bewitched by the other party's words. She already had a lot of brothers in Daiyu state. She was not interested in acknowledging another brother. The man in black was silent for a while. No one instigated me. I'm a member of the Snow Clan. Sometimes, I bring food to the Great Elder. Last night, the Great Elder told me that you had the complete map and wanted to come to the Holy Land of the Snow Clan. I was curious. When Gong Yimo heard this, she immediately determined that this person was lying. If he kept delivering food to the blind man, would the blind man let him follow even though he knew it was a trap? Gong Yimo's lips curled into an evil smile. Did the Great Elder tell you that the entrance to the treasure is fake? Gong Yimo was originally angry at him for lying and wanted to scare him. However, when he heard this, his breathing became unstable. He was really scared. Fake. His voice rose an octave. His eyes were wide open. Under the light of the torch, his eyes were so fierce that it looked like he wanted to eat someone. If it's fake, why did you come in? He asked loudly and fiercely. What Gong Yimo did not know was that after she left the blind man's place, this person went to the blind man's place. He saw the blind man covered in blood and looked like he had lost a battle. This person thought that the blind man had stopped them from finding the treasure and was subdued by Gong Dai and Gong Yimo. Therefore, he did not expect Gong Yimo to come in even though she knew that the entrance was fake. In the end, he got himself into trouble. Gong Yimo blinked and pouted. What's so scary about traps? Also, I thought that the person who followed us in was the mastermind. I didn't expect it to be a small fish like you. He did not look like a boss at all. The man in black was so angry that he laughed. The newborn calf was not afraid of the tiger. He had not been in for long, so he should be able to get out. Therefore, he made a prompt decision and said loudly, "Let me go. I want to get out. Do you know how dangerous this place is? You dare to come in through a fake passage?" Gong Yimo frowned. The fake passage is definitely not far from the real passage. What's wrong with coming in to find clues? You saw it too. We've been in here for so long, but nothing happened, right? The man in black was speechless. Finally, he sneered. Yes, you're right. We can find clues to the real entrance here, but you have to be alive to come in and leave. Let me go. Gong Yimo expected that he would not be able to escape from Gong Dai's hands. Therefore, she asked Gong Dai to let him go. Do you know why the sacred grounds are called sacred grounds? The man in black rubbed his hand that was hurting. His eyes stared at Gong Yimo. It made Gong Yimo feel a chill down her spine. Because there is a treasure that has existed for 100 years. Gong Yimo remembered that blind man said. The man in black was so angry that he was trembling. Yes, you still know that it is a treasure. It is a treasure that fell from the heavens 100 years ago. It is something like a huge black rock. It has many uses, but the most important one is to bewitch people's heart. Bewitch people's hearts. Gong Yimo looked at Gong Dai. She suddenly thought of the black rock that old lady Shui gave her. It also had the ability to stimulate the nerves. He said that in the sacred grounds of the Snow Clan, there was a huge rock like that. That was a little dangerous. The so-called bewitching people's hearts was to stimulate their nerves and cause them to hallucinate, right? The more afraid something was, the more likely it would happen. That is a little dangerous. If this fake entrance has that rock you speak of. Gong Yimo frowned as she rubbed her chin. All right, let's go out first. Actually, she felt that it was a pity. Originally she thought that although this fake entrance was fake, it was still dangerous. But the danger level was not that scary for people with high martial arts like them. Maybe they could even find some clues to the real entrance. But she did not expect that there would be such an accident. No wonder that blind man kept saying that it was a treasure but did not say what it was. It was on purpose. He wanted them to die here. Just a broken rock and he wanted them to die. Wasn't he too naive? But because of this man's words, they decided not to go forward. They decided to retreat first. Gong Yimo was originally in a relaxed mood. But the more they walked, the heavier her mood became. They had walked for a long time and this black tunnel seemed to have no end. They still had not reached the entrance. Gong Dai and the black-clothed man's expression was grave. Obviously they had also discovered this problem. Gong Yimo suddenly stopped walking. When she stopped, Gong Dai also stopped. Only that black-clothed man was so anxious that his forehead was sweating. "Why did you stop walking?" Gong Yimo ignored him and only said to Gong Dai, "Smell me. Do you smell the powder on my body?" Chapter 540. Gong Ju sniffed the air and said with certainty, "No." In other words, after walking for so long, they still hadn't reached the place where she had scattered the powder. Only the man in black had the fragrance. Then, were they going in circles? Gong Yimo's expression turned ugly. She had underestimated them. She knew that there was a trap, but she still wanted to check it out. It was because she didn't care about those people in the past. Now, it seemed that she had fallen into their trap. They had obviously fallen into an illusion. Because they were afraid that they couldn't get out, this tunnel would never end. Whatever they were afraid of, it would happen. "I'm sorry. I was careless." Gong Yimo lowered her head and apologized to Gong Dai. Gong Dai didn't feel any pressure at all. "Don't be afraid. I'm here." He didn't think that there would be a place that they couldn't get out of. His calmness made Gong Yimo calm down as well. That's right. What did they have to be afraid of? No matter how strange or powerful this place was, she had her space and Gong Dai. What was there to be afraid of? However, the man in black was anxious. "Is this the time to apologize? Let's get out first." Gong Yimo wanted to calm him down, but when she looked over, something strange happened. In Gong Dai and Gong Yimo's eyes, that person actually disappeared with a look of horror. Gong Yimo rubbed her eyes to make sure that he had really disappeared. She panicked again. At this moment, Gong Dai held her hand tightly. "Calm down, qi in your dantian." Gong Yimo quickly retracted her mind and did as she was told. Gong Dai said at the right time, "Don't be afraid. He disappeared because we were no longer afraid of not being able to get out, so we left the illusion. However, because he was trapped in fear, he wasn't on the same level as us, so he disappeared." Gong Yimo narrowed her eyes and looked at him. "That is to say, maybe from the moment we came in, we were already unconscious and fell into an illusion together." Gong Dai comforted her. "If that's the case, I'm interested in that stone. It can unknowingly cause people to fall into unconsciousness and hallucinate. It's really a terrifying thing." Gong Yimo's expression was much more serious. "We have to find a way to wake up first." Gong Dai nodded. "There is a very direct way." "What?" Gong Dai pulled out his narrow sword and asked curiously, "Do you think people will die in an illusion?" Gong Yimo lowered her head and pondered. "I once read in a book that some mental patients would drown in their own illusions. In other words, people can kill themselves." Gong Dai's eyes suddenly flashed with a cold light. "Then I would like to give it a try." Gong Yimo didn't understand what he meant, but the next second, Gong Yimo felt a sharp pain in her abdomen. He raised his head and looked at Gong Dai in disbelief. Gong Dai smiled deeply. "Gong Yimo, it seems like you still haven't learned your lesson. What?" He walked closer step by step and his appearance turned from dark to light. His attire changed from an ordinary black robe to the regent's court attire. The silver dragon embroidered on the black robe was vivid and lifelike. Every step he took seemed to be stepping on her heart. She was covered in blood and retreated backwards in horror. Gong Dai held his sword and closed in step by step. In the previous life, You were killed by this prince. In this life, you actually dare to come close to this prince. It seems like this prince's punishment on you wasn't deep enough, it wasn't painful enough. His clear black and white eyes were so cold. That chilling murderous intent was a nightmare that Gong Yimo would never forget. She couldn't help but think of Gong Dai's death row prison, that dark period of time. Every day was endless torture. No, you're not Gong Dai. Gong Dai won't hurt me. Her voice trembled. It sounded firm, but she didn't realize that she was panicking. Gong Dai gave a laugh. Foolish woman. This king will kill you once, so I'll kill you a second time. Kill you once, so I'll kill you a second time. This voice was like a nightmare that kept repeating in Gong Yimo's mind. Those beautiful scenes were like fireworks that shattered in her mind, turning into countless beautiful fragments that fell into the darkness. In the end, only Gong Dai's dark and cold eyes were left. Die. He smiled. That narrow sword viciously stabbed down towards her chest, but it was blocked by something. The expected pain did not appear. Gong Yimo looked down and saw that there was a glowing soft armor around her chest. This was the present that Gong Dai had given her for her 18th birthday. Her thoughts were a bit chaotic and those sealed memories seemed to suddenly appear. She clearly remembered that when she was 9 years old, Gong Dai had obediently massaged her back. She remembered that when she was 11 years old, she had sent him to the West Continent. At Shuli Pavilion, he had kowtowed to her 3 times. She remembered that when she was 13 years old, he had cut his flesh to feed her blood. She remembered that little Seven had secretly told her that the tube top-like soft armor she was wearing was made by Gong Dai after destroying a lot of natural silk. Gong Dai was afraid that she would be injured and afraid that she would feel restricted, so he made this kind of light soft armor that was specially made to protect her heart. Gong Yimo looked up at the person who wanted to kill her. He wasn't Gong Dai. As expected, when she looked up, that person kept retreating and disappeared into the darkness. Heaven and earth were destroyed and she was the only one left. The more she was afraid of something, the more it would appear. Was she afraid of being alone? Gong Yimo stood up and looked around in a daze. Her mind was in a daze and it seemed like someone was screaming. It was also like the sound of a mosquito flapping its wings. She was a little afraid. She had always been alone. She couldn't see the road ahead, only the present. A corpse fell beside his feet and the scene suddenly changed. She was covered in blood, some of it was other people's blood and some of it was her own. Looking up, there were corpses everywhere as far as the eye could see. The sun was setting and smoke was everywhere. The last person she had killed, this land. Finally, she was the only one left alive. Repressed, angry, afraid, aggrieved. She often had this dream in her previous life. She would kill people in the day and at night, she would dream that she had killed everyone. Then, she would be the only one left. Why? Gong Yimo suddenly knelt down in the sand and screamed. The faces of the people around her were very clear and not blurry like in the dream. Their deaths were extremely tragic. Their limbs were incomplete. Most of their faces were stained with blood and she couldn't see their faces clearly. However, Gong Yimo could see that they were very young. When the country was destroyed, home was no longer home. Even the youngest person had to go to war. And her hands. Gong Yimo knelt on the ground and looked at her hands that were full of blood. She had killed many children. She didn't want to do this. It was those greedy people who wanted to use the war to unify the world after they obtained the throne. She was only resisting this fate. However, if she didn't resist, would this war not affect the entire mainland? Chapter 541. If it wasn't for her, no matter how turbulent this continent was, it would still be peaceful. At least not so many people would die. Gong Yimo turned around and found Gong Che standing behind her. Brother Crown Prince, she knelt and walked towards him. She felt that in this world, everyone blamed her except the Crown Prince. After all, she did all these wrong things for the sake of the Crown Prince, who knew that before she could get close, the Crown Prince's sword blocked her path. For me, he sneered, You did it for your own ambition. You refused to hand over the military power and said that you wanted to solve the war personally. These are all excuses for you to rule the world. You. Gong Yimo widened her eyes. Her gorgeous phoenix robe was stained with dust and her face became silent. She looked at Gong Che with heartache and felt that these were all excuses. These were excuses for Gong Che to not love her. She should have said, "You said it in such a dignified way because you want to remove me and let Su Miaolan take the throne." But at this moment, she looked at Gong Che's cold eyes and suddenly understood. He really thought that she was ambitious and wanted to take over the 4 countries and rule the world. Why didn't she see it in the beginning? Do you really think so? Gong Yimo suddenly asked coldly, "You're afraid that I want to rule the world. But you're afraid of me, not because you don't like me." Gong Yimo's unreasonable words made Gong Che silent. Because she didn't remember this part, the Gong Che in this memory would not answer her. Gong Yimo lowered her head and saw that her skirt was stained with blood. Gong Che's suspicion was like a sharp arrow, making her feel so painful that she couldn't breathe. Big drops of tears fell from her eyes. "Why are you suspecting me?" Her voice was so soft that it was almost inaudible. I really just want everyone to calm down. I want to use violence to suppress violence and pacify the world. Did I do something wrong again? I didn't do it on purpose. A huge mistake has already been made. What's the use of whether it was intentional or not? Su Miaolan smiled as she handed over a cup of poisoned wine. "No one in this world will understand you, not even your husband. You are destined to be alone. This is your destiny." Su Miaolan smiled as she handed over a cup of poisoned wine. She smiled like a flower. "It must be very tiring, right? No one acknowledged you, no one trusted you, you were condemned by everyone, you were cursed by the world, but you're dead. Your sins will be redeemed." Gong Yimo looked at the wine cup that suddenly appeared in her hand. It reflected her aged appearance when she was 30 years old. "Damn you. You are the one who brought the weapons of evil into the world and incited the evil thoughts of the people. Damn you. You've killed so many people. Those people should be living well. Even your lover suspects that you have ulterior motives. What's the point of you not dying? I'm really tired." Gong Yimo clenched the wine cup. She really wanted to die. "Royal sister." Gong Yimo paused. She turned around and saw Gong Ju, who was only 6 years old, standing there with a thin and pale face. "Royal sister, don't leave me." Gong Yimo was shocked. Little Gong Dai approached step by step. With every step he took, he grew a little. When he reached her, he had already turned into a 17-year-old. "Royal sister, you still have me." The wine cup suddenly shattered. Gong Yimo had a headache. The environment around her changed again. Birds sang and flowers bloomed. Time was peaceful. Qiu Xingfeng was packing her luggage. His slow movements clearly showed his unwillingness. Isn't it good to stay on Mount Yunding? He was already in his 20s. But because of his tender appearance, he pouted like a teenager. Don't go down the mountain, okay? Gong Yimo suddenly wanted to cry. She wanted to tell him, okay, I won't go down the mountain. I'll stay on Mount Yunding with you forever. It was too scary to go down the mountain. She didn't want to meet people she shouldn't meet. Do things she shouldn't do. Make the world miserable and turn upside down. She, as a girl, really couldn't bear it, but she couldn't control herself. She couldn't even control her expression of joy and yearning. I want to go down the mountain. It's too boring on the mountain. Don't worry, I'll come back. I'll bring you a gift. No. I don't want to go down the mountain. I won't go. I won't go. Qiu Xingfeng. Gong Yimo looked at Qiu Xingfeng. She desperately wanted to grab his hand, but his white clothes fluttered like a dream that she couldn't catch. Then his white clothes were stained with blood. He fell into her arms. The last man who would treat her so well was dead. Ah! Gong Yimo screamed in pain. The snow on Mount Yunding turned red. The flowers withered and the birds flew away. The whole world was dark red. Why? Why did you do this to me? I can't accept it. I can't accept it. I didn't do anything wrong. Those people's greed wasn't my fault. I've already redeemed myself by pacifying the 4 countries. Why did you let the most important people die in front of me? Why? Gong Dai hugged Gong Yimo tightly. Her little face was pale and cold sweat flowed down. She looked like she was in pain. What exactly did she dream of? At this moment, the man in black lit a fire and said angrily, "It's no use. You can only walk out of this illusion by yourself. You can't wake her up." Gong Dai suddenly looked at him and smiled coldly. "Then how did you walk out?" His voice was full of murderous intent. The man in black didn't back down and said, "I came out the same way you came out." He pointed at the tunnel behind him. "This tunnel can create illusions. It's good news. It proves that we didn't come to a fake entrance. We came to the main entrance of the treasure," he said softly. "It's said that the main entrance of the treasure isn't hidden. So they set up many checkpoints along the way. Just like this tunnel, when it was being built, the people of the sacred lands used medicine to confuse people's consciousness. That's how it achieved this effect. Even grass doesn't grow inside. When people walk in, they will fall into a coma. In addition, the treasure that fell from the sky will disturb this area. The more people are afraid of something, the more they will dream of it. If they die in the dream, they will die too." The man in black stared at Gong Yimo with a smile on his face. "You and I can walk through because we have no fear. But she seems to have a lot of fear in her heart. But her willpower is very strong. I've seen people fall into this trap and die very quickly. She has been unconscious for more than 2 hours, but she's still fighting the dream. She has a strong will, but I don't know what those fears are." Gong Dai hugged Gong Yimo tightly. He looked at Gong Yimo's face and whispered in her ear, "Royal sister, don't leave me, you still have me." But at this moment, he suddenly noticed that Gong Yimo's mouth was bleeding. This phenomenon made Gong Dai panic. Chapter 542. He pulled out his sword and pointed it at the man in black. "I don't care what method you use. Wake her up." The man in black was shocked. He wanted to step back but was stopped by Gong Dai's murderous aura. Cold sweat condensed bit by bit, but he still had a stiff smile on his face. "No. I can't do anything." His Adam's apple moved, and he swallowed. "She can only rely on herself. She is the famous princess of Jiu country. This illusion can't trap her." Gong Yimo suddenly groaned. Surprised, Gong Ju quickly looked at her, only to see that she was sweating more and more. Her face was pale as if she would die at any time. He remembered that Gong Yimo shouted for him not to kill her. Why would the royal sister dream that he wanted to kill her? It was impossible. Gong Yimo crawled forward in the bloody ground. Qiu Xingfeng, who was in her arms, suddenly woke up and stabbed her with his sword, almost killing her. Then he chased after her crazily as if he didn't know her. "Gong Yimo, you killed my disciple and my master. I want you to pay with your life." His eyes were red. Every time the sword stabbed her, it would leave a scar on her body, and every time it would hurt her to the core. There were several times when Gong Yimo wanted to just die like this. But there seemed to be a vague voice in her heart, telling her to crawl forward in an attempt to escape. "I want to live. I want to live. I have to live." But there was a cliff in front of her, and there was no way to escape. She turned around, and Qiu Xingfeng sneered, and directly pierced her abdomen with his sword. He nailed her to the ground. His face seemed to be covered with fog, and she couldn't see his face clearly. "No one wants you to live, and the whole world wants you to die." "No." Gong Yimo narrowed her eyes, and blood kept gushing out. She felt that she couldn't breathe, and her body gradually became stiff and numb. "I want to live." Why? Why did she want to live even though she was tired and felt that there was no meaning in living? At this moment, she suddenly felt a kind of warmth enveloping her. She suddenly felt that she could breathe, and her limbs and bones were no longer so stiff. "Because I want you to live." A voice seemed to come from the horizon, but it directly exploded in her ears. She opened her eyes, but she didn't see anything. "We're not married yet." That's right, she still wanted to get married, but with whom? "We also want to have cute children." She wanted to bear a child for someone. That person said that he wanted a boy and a girl. The boy would protect her with him, and the girl would pamper her as if she was pampering her. That person, who was it? When she opened her eyes again, she saw a person wearing a black brocade robe suddenly appear in front of her. She couldn't see his face clearly, but he used his back to block Qiu Xingfeng's attack. "Be careful," she shouted subconsciously. "You must be someone who's eyeing the treasure, otherwise blind man wouldn't want you to be trapped here. What's your motive? Who sent you here?" He seemed to be aggrieved, and after some time, he spoke in a low voice. "I'm not here to snatch the treasure from you." He frowned, and his voice became even lower. "Legend has it that the people in the sacred lands used the treasure to develop a medicine that could clear one's mind. I want that." Gong Yimo didn't take his words to heart at first, but who knew that the other party spoke in a low voice again. "My mother, because she had been tortured for a long time, she went mad. I heard that the medicine can restore one's sanity." Gong Yimo originally wanted to laugh, but she suddenly thought of something and asked anxiously, "Restore her sanity? What do you mean?" That man licked his lips. "Someone once saw it, a natural-born retard in the sacred lands was cured. So that medicine will definitely be useful for my mother." Gong Yimo's hand suddenly grabbed onto Gong Dai's clothes tightly. "Really?" He nodded his head vigorously. "The Snow Clan's treasure isn't gold, silver, or jewelry, but they used the treasure that fell from the sky 100 years ago to develop many useful things. It's just one of the medicines that can clear one's mind." Chapter 543. At this moment, Gong Dai hugged Gong Yimo and said softly, "Now that we can't get out, we can only go forward. Since the meteorite can affect this place, it means that the treasure is not far away." This man guessed that this entrance is the main entrance of the treasure, with many checkpoints, to prevent people from spying on the treasure. And that blind elder of the Snow Clan concluded that we will die here, so he did not stop us from coming in. After hearing Gong Dai's words, Gong Yimo could not help but ask the man in black, "What is in the sacred land? Why do so many people want to come in?" The man in black pondered for a moment. "There are many good things. For example, there is a medicine that prevents one from aging, or a poison that can make one go crazy. It can stimulate one's potential, but it can also make one lose their rationality." Gong Yimo thought of that crazy woman. Poison? It's something from the treasure? That was clearly a failed stimulant. The medicine that Empress Dowager Yu Qi concocted to make people go crazy was more advanced. Although there were after effects, at least the person would still have some rationality. Of course, the effect of madness was not as good as the poison. The man in black smiled strangely. The poison can make people lose their rationality, but it can increase one's combat power by 3 times. So what? After being poisoned by the poison, no matter how strong one's combat power is, it is still a double-edged sword. What if it can be controlled? The man in black's voice echoed in the sky well. "Do you know what the holy stone that fell from the sky is called?" Gong Yimo was stared at by his cold eyes and asked subconsciously, "What?" "Sound transmission stone," he said with a strange expression. The formation of the poison is closely related to the sound transmission stone. If someone is poisoned and has a sound transmission stone, guess what the consequences will be? Gong Yimo narrowed her eyes. He shrugged. "Anyway, I don't know the details. After all, I don't have this thing." Gong Yimo was shocked. She suddenly remembered that the blind man had said that after his mother married the Snow King, she was bewitched by him and stole something from the sacred land. And that thing made the Snow Clan's king so greedy that he wanted to kill the Dai Yu state's monarch. Could it be this? A voodoo that could drive people crazy? Gong Yimo felt that this thing might not be that simple. Moreover, this person knew it so clearly. Who would believe that there was no ghost? "Hey, what's your name?" That person smiled. The smile on the corner of his mouth seemed to have been measured. "My name is Snow. You can call me Big Brother." At noon the next day, Gong Dai and the others had already passed through several mountains. This treasure was in the heart of hopeless forest, surrounded by countless mountains and trees, and the treasure was in the middle of these mountains. Gong Yimo was depressed. She just wanted to get a snow Ganoderma. As for that man, with Gong Dai around, she was not worried at all. Although the other party's background was unknown and untrustworthy, it was better for him to be alive. Perhaps he would be useful. Why aren't they here yet? Gong Yimo was going crazy. Although the traps along the way couldn't hurt them, it was very troublesome to deal with them. Wasn't it just a small treasure trove of a small country? They hid it too well. Gong Dai gestured for her to calm down. At this moment, they were at the bottom of a mountain, and suddenly they smelled a strange smell. Gong Yimo walked to the end of the tunnel and looked, and instantly her scalp went numb. There was no road in front of them, only a big pit. And there were countless snakes entangled in it. There were so many of them, and they were so big. Were all the poisonous snakes in the entire hopeless forest gathered here? In front of them, there was a stone platform, and behind the stone platform was a stone door. It was very big, and it looked like it hadn't been opened for a long time. But how were they going to pass through the snake pit in front of them and reach the other side? Gong Dai looked for a while. For such a long distance, there must be 2 footholds to cross. Not to mention the snakes in the pit, there were also snakes on the walls. Moreover, there was a strange mucus on the walls, and it looked very slippery. There was definitely no way for people to step on it. How are we going to cross? Gong Yimo subconsciously looked at Gong Dai. Why don't we burn it? At this moment, the black-clothed man Shuese suddenly said, we can't make too much noise. If we forcefully attack, this place will collapse. This is also one of their methods to prevent others from entering. Then what should we do? Gong Yimo felt that this person seemed to be worth a lot. Use your blood. Shuese looked at Gong Yimo's white neck. If this tunnel is really the main entrance of the treasure, and these restrictions are used to prevent outsiders, then your blood must be the key. Gong Yimo felt that it wasn't so simple. If my blood is so useful, that blind man wouldn't let us in so easily. Won't you know once you try? Shuese urged her. Gong Yimo glanced at Gong Dai, and Gong Dai killed the snake that was pouncing towards them with a sword. He nodded. He would watch this man. Gong Yimo bit her finger and dripped her blood. It was as if they had met a plague. All the snakes frantically dodged to the sides. It was really effective. Gong Yimo gave Shuese a kick. You go down first. Shuese felt wronged. Ari, I am your brother. Although he said that, he still quickly walked forward. Gong Dai looked at the sticky liquid on the ground and frowned. He carried Gong Yimo in his arms and walked forward. There were snakes on both sides, but when the snakes smelled the blood on Gong Yimo's body, they automatically dodged away. So it was very easy for them to walk through the snake basin. Gong Yimo couldn't help but touch Gong Dai's face. Gong Dai, you didn't sleep well last night, right? Last night Gong Dai and Shuese were on guard duty and didn't sleep for long. I'm fine. Even in such a cold and damp place, the smell on his body was still clean and refreshing. After we get the Snowlingji, we will go home. Home, this word was really beautiful. After experiencing that heart-shaking illusion, when she woke up and her soul was still unstable, the words that Gong Dai said to her were like a brand, heavily engraved in her heart. It made her rely on Gong Dai even more. Shuese, who was walking in front, said angrily, can't we go out first before flirting with each other? Why don't you take a look at where this place is? The surrounding snakes didn't dare to get close, but they stared at them and kept flicking out their tongues. To think that they still had the mood to flirt. When Gong Yimo heard that, she was not convinced as she hugged Gong Dai and kissed him. She even purposely made a very loud sound. None of your business. Shuese was speechless and couldn't be bothered with her. He took the lead and walked to the front of the stone door. This stone door was very big. Shuese and Gong Dai both used all their strength before they managed to push the door open. A long buzzing sound came out as if a place that had been asleep for many years had been opened. The light from the fire illuminated this space which had been sealed for a long time. In front of them was a pharmacy and there were quite a number of medicines in the room. Gong Yimo's eyes lit up. She wondered if the medicine that Shuese mentioned which could clear one's mind was here. She immediately said, quickly look around, is there that medicine that you mentioned? Chapter 544. Medicine? Snow squinted his eyes as he sized her up. So this is the reason why you brought me along. You've made Big Brother so sad. Gong Yimo glared at him and he hurriedly went to look for the medicine obediently, but in the end he returned empty-handed. No, this is perhaps the outermost small pharmacy. How could the good stuff be placed here? Gong Yimo touched her chin. You said that we're at the outermost part of the treasure deposit. Don't tell me that after going through so many checkpoints, we still haven't entered the treasure deposit. Rubbish. He rolled his eyes. If it's that easy to enter, that stinky blind man wouldn't have lied to us to come here. It'll only be more dangerous in front, so you guys better be careful. Saying that, he took the lead and walked into the next tunnel. Gong Yimo gave Gong Dai a look and Gong Dai followed behind, blocking the other party's line of sight so that Gong Yimo had time to keep all the medicine in the house. Gong Yimo felt that Snow's words might not be trustworthy. He said that the most valuable thing in this treasure deposit was the medicine. Then how could the medicine placed behind such a huge and heavy stone door be ordinary? Perhaps this was specially placed outside to let those outsiders who barged into the forbidden grounds to return after getting some benefits, so these medicine must be good stuff. Just that she didn't know if it had passed its expiry date after being placed for so long. After Gong Yimo kept the medicine, she followed behind while Gong Dai waited for her at the front. Not long after, they came across an even bigger door. This door was extremely strange as it was entirely black. It looked even heavier than the previous door. Gong Dai had tried before but he couldn't use brute force to push it open. Seeing that Gong Yimo had arrived, Snow didn't ask her what she had done earlier but directly said to her, "Do you see that groove? Drip your blood into it and it'll be done. In this world, only your blood can open this door." Gong Yimo didn't have the mood to ask him how he knew so clearly. She raised her head and saw that the groove he was talking about was at the base of a ferocious beast's tongue. If he didn't tell her, she really wouldn't know that place where she could drip her blood into. Gong Yimo bit her finger and placed it in the stone beast's mouth. Inexplicably, she felt a suction force. This stone beast was sucking her blood. Just as she was about to take her hand out, the stone beast's mouth suddenly closed. Gong Yimo instantly felt her wrist being bitten by the stone teeth. Blood flowed out quickly. When Gong Dai saw this, he immediately wanted to smash the stone beast's head. However, Gong Yimo stopped him. Look, her blood seemed to have been mixed with something else and turned into a fluorescent red. Then, a red fluorescent blood column began to spread from the stone beast's head to its limbs, as if it had been injected with blood. Gong Yimo gritted her teeth and held on, controlling her blood output. However, the process was too long. When Gong Dai could not help but break the greedy stone beast's head, they heard a heavy thud. The door opened. The stone beast's mouth slowly opened, and Gong Dai hurriedly bandaged the wound on her wrist. "Are you okay?" he asked anxiously. After losing so much blood, Gong Yimo did not feel the heartache. However, Gong Dai's heart ached to death. He was even thinking, was it really only royal sister's blood that would work? His black eyes that were filled with killing intent landed on Snow. If there was a next time, he would use this person's blood to test it out. The group of them walked in once again. This time, Gong Yimo could feel that they had stepped into the territory of a wild beast. That feeling of rejection was very obvious. Obviously, if they had been wandering around the treasure trove previously, then this time, they had entered the outermost layer of the treasure trove. Behind the stone door, there were many pools. Inside, there was a bubbling sound, as if there was a viscous liquid boiling. Gong Yimo guessed that there might be geothermal energy underneath the pools. That was why the 8 pools were boiling. As for the liquid in the pools, no one knew what it was. However, they did not have any intention to investigate. Gong Yimo took advantage of the time when Snow was not paying attention and kept half of the thick and heavy stone door into her space. Her thinking was very simple. Opening this door required so much blood from her. If they were unable to advance and could only retreat later, with this door blocking their way, wouldn't it cost them their lives? Snow did not seem to notice that half of the stone door was gone. He had a fanatical look as he moved forward, not caring about them behind him. Following that, they went through many mechanisms. This time, Even Gong Yimo could not help but praise the wisdom of these people from the sacred land. Originally, she did not place these mechanisms in her eyes. But after they had all suffered some injuries, they knew how powerful the ancient people were. However, it was obviously impossible to trap them here like this. They didn't know what was waiting for them after this. Underground, they did not know if it was night or day. Finally, after going through countless mechanisms, they came to a stone room. There was only one medicine bottle in the stone room. Snow's eyes lit up and wanted to snatch it away. But Gong Dai was one step ahead and took the jade bottle in his hand. "What is this?" Gong Dai asked coldly. Snow's eyes flashed past a sliver of danger. But the smile was still carved on his face as he grinned and said, "This is the mind-refreshing pill that I want. The snow ganoderma that you want will be found very soon. Return this to me." Gong Yimo walked forward and opened the medicine bottle to take a sniff. "Are you sure?" Why did she only smell blood the moment she opened it? Was this medicine really able to make a person's mind clear? Snow remained calm and unruffled as he said, "Of course it is. Why would I lie to you? If you want to get the snow ganoderma, you cannot do without my help. Why is there a need to fall out with me here?" Gong Yimo suddenly said, "You're lying, right?" She twirled the medicine bottle in her hand. "There is a GU poison in the treasure, and the GU poison will make people lose their rationality, turning them into killing machines. But if the GU poison did not have any benefits, they would not have kept it to harm the world. That is to say, going crazy might just be a side effect of the GU poison." Gong Yimo's words made Snow's gaze not look at the bottle in her hand, but at her. "Your conjecture is very interesting. Continue." Gong Yimo leaned on Gong Dai and said softly, "If the above conjecture is true, they would definitely want to develop a medicine that can clear one's mind to counter this side effect. But they must have failed. Because if they succeeded, they would not have kept the GU poison hidden. So you're lying to me. There is no such medicine here." Saying so, she frowned slightly and said with some disappointment, "You're using this to lie to me because you know that I want to use the medicine that can clear one's mind to help a person. You know that I treat Mount Yunding differently, and Mount Yunding has always been mysterious. Thinking about it, only Xue Wu she would tell you this. So, even if you're my brother, you're not as harmless as you appear. Perhaps, you're the one who wants to control me." Snow was stunned at first, then he laughed loudly. Chapter 545. "I have to say that younger sister, your imagination is really rich." His refined smiling face flashed a trace of gloominess, "But I feel that we are still in a cooperative relationship. You want the snow ganoderma and I want the GU poison. Our objectives are different, so why not help each other?" Gong Dai protected Gong Yimo behind him. "You want to hurt her, so you are an enemy." Gong Dai had always been on guard against this man, and now seeing that royal sister had laid her cards on the table with him, he also did not want to endure any longer. The narrow sword in his hand drew out, and that pair of black and white eyes coldly landed on the other party's body, his killing intent almost materialize. Don't. Snow saw that Gong Dai was serious and hurriedly waved his hand. "Without me, you will definitely not be able to get the treasure. This place is a place of no return, and it was that stinky blind man who intentionally deceived you all into coming in, although he had also harmed me. But at least we have walked to this point together, shouldn't we continue to help each other? Internal strife will only lead to death." Saying that, he looked at the jade bottle in Gong Yimo's hand with some regret. "That thing you all want, then take it. I won't snatch it, all right?" Gong Dai glanced at Gong Yimo. He had always respected royal sister's way of thinking. Gong Yimo looked at the other party in a scrutinizing manner. "If you want to continue to cooperate, then I can ask you a few questions. You must answer truthfully." Definitely, ask away." Snow's face was always smiling, and that smile seemed to have never changed. "Back then the Snow clan forced a piece of black stone into my hands. What was their motive?" Snow narrowed his eyes. "You're talking about that stone, Haha, you've really misunderstood old madam. She had good intentions, Good intentions?" Gong Yimo sneered. "That stone has an effect on me." Snow nodded his head. There will be a little effect, but once you get used to it, it will be fine. But, if you had always carried that stone with you, previously you wouldn't have taken so long to get through the illusion. After he finished speaking, he pulled out a rope from around his neck. On the rope was the same black stone. He said to Gong Dai a little embarrassedly, "You're not bad. You have a strong will, so you were able to break through in one go. But I can't. But I have a treasure. As long as I have this stone, the forbidden land of illusion in the treasure trove will be useless to me." Gong Yimo frowned. She couldn't tell if the other party was telling the truth, so she asked another question. "You said you came for the Gu poison?" She said calmly, "Then you must know why the Gu poison was first developed. What was its original purpose?" Gong Yimo's questions made Shuese ponder for a moment. He smiled and said softly, "Gu poison, it's not really a poison. It used to be called Gu sacrifice. Snow Country is proficient in the art of Gu. After the treasure fell from the sky, the people of the Holy Land were very curious about it. In the end, they found that the black stone could be eaten after it was ground into powder." He smiled lightly, "But after people ate it, they would fall into a dream for life and sleep forever. But, people who fall into a deep sleep, not only don't need to eat, they won't grow old. When they die, their appearance will still be the same as when they took it." Gong Yimo's pupils contracted. "Won't grow old?" Shuese nodded. The Gu poison appeared in the beginning because they wanted to not grow old. They had failed many times. Later, they found out by chance that the black stone powder could be eaten by the Gu. Then people would eat the Gu or eat the powder ground from the Gu. Then they wouldn't fall into a deep sleep and would be able to retain their youth. So there are two types of Gu poison. The first type is when the Gu enters the body alive. Then they can use a sound Gu that can let out a low cry to control the time when the Gu poison in the body explodes. Just like the kind that Wuxi ate. After the Gu poison entered the body, once it heard the sound of the sound Gu, it would explode in the body. At that time, the Gu poison would spread to the 4 limbs. This Gu poison didn't have a mother and child Gu. Once it exploded, it would die. So it couldn't be controlled by the sound Gu. This was also why Dongluani could make Shui Wuxi go crazy but couldn't control her. As for the other type, Shuese said with a smile, the other type is a little purer. It directly grinds the Gu poison into powder. Once it's eaten, it will explode. Gong Yimo suddenly thought of that crazy woman Shui Wuxi and said in a low voice, "After a person consumes it, they won't grow old. But they will go crazy uncontrollably. Then isn't this a failed product?" Shuese smiled faintly, "Not necessarily." He pinched the stone around his neck, because the main component of the Gu poison is this stone that can interfere with people's hearts. So when a person goes crazy, it's not impossible to control. Gong Yimo was suddenly shocked. If a person could be controlled by another person after going crazy, wouldn't that person become another person's killing machine? This person's motive was indeed not pure. You want to obtain the Gu poison and control others. Then you want to use the Gu poison on me to control me, to open the treasure for you. Gong Yimo saw that he was still smiling, but that smile made her feel cold. "No, what you gave Shui Wu she was a live Gu poison. That means you want me to be poisoned, but you also want to delay the time when it will flare up. There's only one explanation. That is you haven't found a way to control me. And this method might be in this treasure." So that day, if Dongluani had really joined hands with Wu Shi and Qiu Zhongchan to make Gong Yimo eat the Gu, then Dongluani would also die. Because Shuese wanted to poison Gong Yimo, but he didn't want Gong Yimo to flare up at that time. Gong Yimo slowly pulled out her sword. This person had ulterior motives and had tried to scheme against her several times. It's better to just kill him right here. Shuese was still smiling. There is a medicine that can restore a person's consciousness. He suddenly said, back then, the king suddenly killed the people from the Holy Lands because they had developed this medicine. The king only needed beasts that he could control, he didn't need any elixirs. Wouldn't that be useless? Only I can bring you to find this medicine, he said resolutely. There's only one of this medicine in the world and only I know about it. So, Do you still want to kill me? Who are you? Gong Yimo stared at him closely. Shuese laughed softly. I'm your brother. Don't worry, your martial arts are strong and you have helpers. What can I do under your nose? Look at what you've asked. I've answered honestly. You're not poisoned. What's there to be afraid of? Let's continue walking. If we don't hurry, we might starve to death here. He was right. Even if he found a way to control the GU poison here, she wasn't poisoned. What was there to be afraid of? And, she really wanted that medicine. If she could give it to Qiu Xingfeng, it would be a form of compensation, so she kept her sword, but kept her guard up against the other party. The group continued to move forward, and the atmosphere became more serious. Chapter 546. Gong Ju held Gong Yimo's hand and disagreed with her approach. At first glance, he could tell that Snow was a scheming person who was impossible to guard against. As far as he knew, Royal Sister only knew one idiot, and that was Qiu Xingfeng. Even though Qiu Xingfeng had helped his sister before, he was very unhappy that she took such a risk for him. She was asking a tiger for its skin. Gong Yimo was thinking about something, but when she saw Gong Dai's serious face, she knew the reason. She couldn't help but pull his clothes. Gong Dai glanced at her with dissatisfaction in his cold eyes. Gong Yimo lowered her head. Well, Qiu Xingfeng was kind to me. I just wanted to repay him. Gong Dai stared at the snow in front of them, but you shouldn't put yourself in danger. In his opinion, snow was an uncertain factor. The longer he stayed, the more dangerous it would be. He held the sword in his hand. He wanted to kill him several times. Gong Yimo quickly held Gong Dai's hand and said shamefully, please bear with it. I know what I'm doing. I won't let him go out alive. She stared at the snow. She didn't expect the person behind the scenes to be so young. Moreover, she always felt that it was a little strange. This person had schemed against her time and time again, but he still dared to appear in front of her openly and speak of those schemes. Was he really fearless? They were surrounded by danger several times. They didn't know how many levels they had passed. Gong Yimo felt exhausted. On the other hand, Gong Dai kept protecting her because he practiced hard. During this time, they needed Gong Yimo's blood to open the way. Gong Dai didn't want to use his blood to test it. He also forced Snow to test it with his blood, but it didn't work. No wonder Snow said that only Gong Yimo could enter here. Another door appeared in front of them. It should have been a night, so they were tired. But after seeing the door, Snow was refreshed. Quick! Open it! Once you open it, you'll find the treasure. There was nothing special about this door. There was a huge lotus flower on it. The flower petals and stamens were carved vividly, as if they had just bloomed. I can open it, but I have a lot of questions that I want to ask you. Gong Yimo's words made Snow impatient. The treasure was right in front of her. Who was going to answer her question? However, he was very clear that this door was made of snow iron and was indestructible. Gong Yimo's blood was the only key, so he suppressed the murderous glint in his eyes and said patiently, ask away. Gong Yimo pressed her hand on the door. Once, I saw the remains of a very cruel sacrificial ceremony in Snow Country under a ruined temple. It implied that they wanted to summon evil spirits and destroy the country and the world. Last time, Shui Wuxi said that I should be the one to destroy the world. So, how do you explain that? Snow laughed. How can we believe such nonsense? Wu Qi must have gone crazy because of the poison. Quickly open the door. He was very anxious as his eyes fell on Gong Yimo, as if he couldn't wait to cut her neck to open the way for him. Gong Yimo's lips curled into a smile. I naturally also feel that it is nonsense, but the reason? Why do so many people from Snow Country believe in this matter? Seeing that he didn't answer, Gong Yimo wouldn't open the door. Snow sighed, showing a helpless look. Little lass, why do you like to get to the bottom of this matter? Tell me. Gong Yimo's face was firm. This person, if she didn't force him, he would definitely not tell her the truth. And all these, she wanted to know. Seeing that Gong Yimo had made up her mind, Snow finally sighed. All right, I'll tell you everything. He smiled, but there was an indescribable glint in his eyes as he talked about a seemingly unrelated matter. Do you know why your mother was so resolute in marrying the king? He gave a strange smile. Because although she was the holy maiden of the sacred lands, second only to one person, but her father's treatment towards her can't be considered good. Snow looked at the huge lotus on the stone door in front of him and said faintly, "Where do you think the mind-refreshing pill came from?" "It was the holy elder of the sacred lands who tested it on your mother. In front of others, she was the high and mighty holy maiden, but behind others, she was merely a medicine man. She had been taking stone powder since young, and in order to prevent her from falling into a deep sleep, her father used all sorts of methods to keep her awake. The pain is something that you can't imagine." His tone seemed to be regretful, but more of it was a kind of ridicule. "I don't know if it was because she had taken too much stone powder, but there seemed to be a link between your mother and that sacred stone. Back then when your mother stole the Gu poison and gave it to the king, Holy Elder originally wanted to kill her, but in the end, he didn't and instead agreed to let her marry the king, because your mother was pregnant, and on the first day she was pregnant, Holy Elder already knew about it. Because in that huge sacred stone in the sacred lands, a piece of red stone heart suddenly appeared." Snow's words made Gong Yimo's hair stand on end. At this moment, he looked at Gong Yimo with a smile. "So you were born different. From the first day you appeared, you were given a legend. So after Snow Country was destroyed, many people believed that you would take revenge for Snow Country. They believed that the sacred stone was the original body of the evil god and that you were the reincarnation of the evil god. They hated the Daiyu state and hated the world, so they hoped that you would destroy the world." Saying this, Snow laughed out loud. "Of course, I don't believe in all these. All right, I've said all I know. Now, can you open this door for me?" Gong Yimo lowered her head and stood behind Gong Dai. "If what you said is true, that my mother had been taking stone powder all year round, then in my body, there should be some of that stone's components, right?" Snow was suddenly stunned. "Just now you said that the stone in your hand has another name. It's called the voice transmission stone. Back then, old Madame Shui gave me that piece of sacred stone to test me. In the end, she found out that because of the stone powder in my body, the sacred stone could affect me, but the effect was very limited. So, can I guess that you came this time to get that piece of red stone heart? Maybe only the stone heart can really control the poison and control me. You indeed don't want to destroy the world, but you made use of those Snow Clan people who want to revive their country to help you control me. With my influence on the 4 countries now, as long as you control me, you can achieve many goals, such as dominating the Central Plains." The moment she finished speaking, Gong Dai's sword directly pierced towards Snow. Snow quickly dodged, but his face was still cut by Gong Dai's sword. Gong Dai had long felt that his face was strange, but who knew that there was no blood after it was cut open. A piece of skin was pulled over his face, setting off the unchanging smile on his face. There was a kind of strangeness that made one's heart tremble. Snow touched his face and said regretfully, "Aya, I really like this human skin mask. You guys are too much." Chapter 547. Gong Yimo was watching coldly by the side. If it was based on martial strength, she felt that Shuese was not Gong Dai's opponent, but she was worried that the other party would play tricks, so she was waiting by the side. "Who exactly are you? Why do you know so much?" It was absolutely impossible for him to be her half-brother. Those who knew the secret of the sacred lands were all dead. Only Blind survived. Snow Clan's king and Xue Lian were both dead. Then who told him all these? Shuese gave a light laugh. "Want to know?" He suddenly took out a jade bottle and poured a blood-red pill into his mouth. In that instant, a trace of blood appeared in his eyes. That pill in his hand was a Gu poison. "Originally I didn't want to use force, but you are so smart. I just said a little and you are able to guess everything. Really making people headache." His voice became gloomier. "Since that is the case, I can only kill Gong Dai. Then I will capture you alive." She could feel his inner strength rising continuously. Gong Yimo was alarmed. Her mind suddenly flashed a possibility. He said that the GU poison's antidote had been developed. Then was it possible that he had taken the antidote before? So the side effects of the GU poison could be controlled by him? As expected, Xuese's strength suddenly rose sharply. But he was not like Xue Wuxi, who did not recognize his own family. Instead he consciously attacked Gong Dai. And in the process of attacking, his strength was still rising. Gong Yimo immediately joined the battle. Originally Xuese's strength was below Gong Dai, but after taking this medicine, he actually had a tendency to surpass her. If this carried on, it would be extremely disadvantageous for them. The three of them fought in a chaotic battle, but all three of them were absolute expert. Once they fought, the commotion was not small. Originally I didn't want to do this. What if I hurt you? Wait till I get the stone heart, then you will be the puppet that I want the most. Xuese's strength continued to rise, but he still had his rationality and could still speak clearly. Gong Yimo had decided to waste time with him. His strength rose greatly because of the GU poison's berserk effect. He also had his rationality because he had taken the antidote before. Blood could detoxify the poison. Then in the process of detoxifying his body, he would be in a berserk state. As long as he could stall for time, everything would be fine. Once the poison was mixed with the snow-colored blood, his battle prowess would return to how it was before, and there would be nothing to fear. But Snow, who had taken medicine, was actually able to fight Gong Yimo and Gong Dai to a draw. Moreover, most of his combat power was placed on Gong Dai. He wanted to kill Gong Dai first before dealing with Gong Yimo. The fight was getting more and more strenuous. Gong Yimo felt a chill in her heart. She felt that she could not drag on like this. Gong Yimo had no choice but to allow those stone flower petals to close up and wrap around her hand. At this moment she was secretly regretting. This Snow Clan's sacred ground was really filled with danger. It was her carelessness. But she must get out. Suddenly Gong Yimo groaned. She felt the flower petals surrounding her hand, and those stamens seemed to be alive as they stabbed into her wound and crazily sucked her blood. At that moment, Gong Yimo suddenly understood. Why did that blind man think that she would die here? It was because there was a possibility that her blood would be sucked dry by this stone door. But Snow did not want to lose her puppet the most. How could he allow such a thing to happen? Gong Dai realized that Gong Yimo's blood was flowing out very quickly and wanted to break this strange lotus. Snow immediately stopped him. Don't break it. Otherwise we will all die here. As he spoke, he suddenly took out a pill. What are you doing? Gong Dai grabbed his hand, thinking that Snow was up to no good. Snow was so anxious that veins popped out on his forehead. This pill can protect her heart meridians. I don't want her to die. At this moment the crashing sounds outside were still continuing. The cave was shaking non-stop. Royal Sister had obviously lost a lot of blood, but the door did not show any signs of opening. Gong Yimo said weakly, "No problem, I will eat it." She also felt that Snow had spent so much effort to obtain the stone heart to control her and would not let her die here. Gong Dai then let go of his hand. Indeed, the moment the pill entered her stomach, Gong Yimo felt that her body, which was about to be sucked dry, suddenly had strength. Her right hand, which was wrapped by the lotus flower petals, clenched into a fist. At that moment, the door finally opened. Snow was the first to run out. Gong Dai wanted to stop him, but Gong Yimo's hand was still stuck in the stone door and she could not leave. The cave was about to collapse. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.